Chapter 233. Does this sword tomb have any sincerity at all? The lead disciple of Kunlun sect, Zhou Mumu, stared dumbfoundedly at the towering mountain in the distance. Inwardly she felt that it was absurd and unbelievable. Is this a guardian? This is King Guardian? The condition for us to enter the next level is to defeat a 10,000 feet tall mountain? Are you kidding me? Although many people would describe the magical ability of cultivators with words like moving mountains and filling the sea, and in fact the great supreme level cultivators in the Wanxian League did have the ability to move mountains and fill the sea. However, among the cultivators present, there was not even a single Taoist master, so how could they move mountains? Not to mention the guardian was not a dead thing, it had a mountain-like body, so its magical ability was certainly higher than that of a mountain. According to legend, only the ancestors of the Desolation Age, which was even earlier than ancient times, had this kind of sky-covering body. And if any of these ancestors were to be brought to this world, perhaps they would have the power to sweep the 9 regions. Of course, if they were really the ancestors of the ancient era, they would not have fallen to be the watchdog of an ancient true immortal, not even the watchdog of the last level. However, the strength of this guardian was too beyond their expectation. At this time, even the most arrogant Xingjing sect people could not help but rejoice that they didn't adopt a high-pressure policy to try to monopolize the sword tomb. The people of 10,000 Arts sect were even more puzzled. Why would the master of this place leave such a test? Don't you think it's too difficult? Wang Lu said, it's probably because the guardian of 10,000 years ago was not so powerful. Upon hearing this, everyone was stunned, and then they realized that this 10,000 feet tall mountain was likely the result of the passage of 10,000 years. Just like a small sapling growing into a towering ancient tree, the guardian of that time may only be a strong enemy for the later inheritor, but now. Zhou Mumu frowned. But why can't I feel any spiritual energy? Wang Lu spread out his hands. Because it's dead. Dead? 10,000 years have passed except for vegetative people who could not die. Not to mention the passage of time here is probably not the same as the outside. 10,000 years outside may be doubled or even more in here. Zhou Mumu asked again. The guardian is dead, what should we do? Whipping corpses. Wang Lu said, I don't know. Maybe there is no good answer to this question. After all, this sword tomb has been sleeping for too long and has experienced the Dharma-ending catastrophe. Many things can't be seen according to the rules. Even if we really encounter a dead end, we have nothing to say. After that, there was a long silence on the summit. The other 3 sects naturally wouldn't completely believe what Wang Lu said. The cultivators of Xingjing sect were divided into 5 teams to explore this vast mountain area. A moment later, the people of 10,000 Arts sect and Kunlun Immortal sect also left. However, everyone agreed to meet here half a day later. Wang Lu shook his head and didn't go down the mountain. Instead, he made a bonfire and began to cook for Lu Li and Bai Shixian. Lu Li was the easiest to take care of. As long as she ate and drank her fill, she could be happy at any time. However, Bai Shixian was still frowning. Senior martial brother, this place's aura is very strange, I can't feel the spirituality of anything. Wang Lu said, this is just the inner space of the sword tomb. It has been sleeping for thousands of years, so how could there be spirituality of anything here? Bai Shixian awkwardly said, things are more complicated than I said. My expression might not be appropriate, in fact. However, before she could continue, Wang Lu had already covered her lips with his hand and shook his head, indicating that she didn't need to say anything. Bai Shixian gawked for a moment. She realized that Wang Lu probably had a deeper idea, and not because he didn't think it through. Immediately, the worry in her heart disappeared, and a smile hung on her face. For a time it was too beautiful to behold. Half a day later, the people of the other 3 sects came back with a complex look. After half a day they have seen what they wanted to see and tried what they wanted to try. The most radical Xingjing sect people even tried to bombard the mountain with their most destructive immortal method. As a result, they only managed to create a 100-meter deep pit on the steel-like mountain. The power was indeed amazing, but it was completely meaningless. Whipping the corpses didn't count as defeating the guardian. Jiang Lu's heart was filled with bad luck as he strode toward Wang Lu. You have a way, just say it. Wang Lu said, to be honest, there's really no reliable way, but there's a crooked way. If your 3 sects don't have a way, you might as well use it to rescue it. How to do it? First, resurrect it and then kill it? Because the condition is to defeat it, if there's no struggle, it probably can't be counted as defeat. Therefore, first, create the conditions for it to struggle. Jiang Lu angrily said, you're simply indulging in fantasy. Resurrect from the dead? Let alone such a behemoth. Even if it's a dead rabbit, do you have the ability to bring its soul back for me to see? A dead person could not be resurrected. Although this was not an absolute theorem in the immortal cultivation world, the difficulty of resurrecting from the dead was very high. It was not something that a group of Shudan stage disciples could easily achieve, let alone the object of resurrection was a tens of thousands of meters tall mountain. Wang Lu said, "Your thinking is constrained by common sense. In fact, on the other hand, because this big guy's level is much higher than that of a wild rabbit, it's actually easier to achieve the resurrection. Especially since its body has evolved to the extent of being able to support the heavens and the earth, it's very likely that what it needs is just a stimulus." Upon hearing this, Jianglu gawked. A faint light flashed through his mind, but he couldn't grasp the details. After all, he was known for his mysterious golden body, so he didn't know much about methods. However, when the others heard Wang Lu's words, they were greatly inspired, especially 10,000 Arts Sex Yi Feifei, who beamed with joy. That's right. In fact, the higher the level of existence, the easier it is to have life characteristics. Compared to the wilderness, the mountain spirit is more likely to appear in the immortal cultivation paradise. High-rank spirit object is more likely to turn into a spirit than an ordinary object. And the heaven stone is far more likely to obtain the good fortune of heaven and earth than an ordinary stone. According to this principle, even if this big guy died, after all, it left behind such a powerful body. Perhaps there's really a hope to resurrect it? Jianglu still couldn't agree. It's still a whimsical idea. For such a huge creature, even if it can be resurrected, the amount of magical power required is enormous, which we can't afford. Wang Lu said, "Therefore this is a last-ditch rescue plan. If you have a better way, I absolutely won't say anything, but do you? Although this method is whimsical, it is, after all, a clear direction that we can strive for. Moreover, everyone here has at least Shudan stage cultivation base. Needless to say, they also have elixirs and elixirs, so a mere magical power supply shouldn't be a problem, right?" Jianglu hesitated for a moment and didn't rush to express his position. However, soon the cultivators of the 10,000 Arts sect gave their approval. Zhan Zai said, "I agree with Brother Wang's plan. Although it sounds absurd, at least it's worth a try." A moment later, Zhou Mumu also nodded. "In any case, there's no better way, so we might as well give it a try." Seeing that the three sects have already expressed their attitude, Jianglu went with the flow. "That being the case, let's try it according to your idea. 10,000 Arts sect, aren't you all good at all kinds of spells and arrays? Why don't you design a set of implementation plan, and the people of the other sects will cooperate with you?" Zhan Zai and the others didn't care about Jianglu's arrogant attitude. Several of them gathered together and gradually immersed themselves in the academic atmosphere. After discussing with each other in high spirits, Zhan Zai concluded, "There is indeed a suitable immortal method. If that mountain is regarded as an ordinary creature, we can try to open its good fortune meridian, transforming pure magical power into the creature's good fortune chi and instilling it. If its physical level is high enough, it should have a reaction and condense its spirituality." Yi Feifei added, "We have calculated it. Although the magical power required is huge, if the people of the four sects can unite, we can completely afford it." Hai Yunfan said, "Of course, we also need to pay attention to the degree of control. We resurrect it to defeat it. If possible, it's best to control the resurrection strength to the minimum, only giving it a living state, not giving it the ability to move." Zhou Mumu raised her eyebrows. "That's right. If after resurrecting it we find that we can't defeat it, that would be a joke." "Good, since you have a way, our Kunlun immortal sect will go all out to catch up." Wang Lu also expressed his position. "This plan is proposed by my Lingjian school, so naturally we are duty-bound to do it." Finally, Jianglu made his decision. "Then it's settled. Everyone hurry up and implement it." Although the Xingjing sect was somewhat bossy with a bureaucratic atmosphere, their action was really amazing. After the plan was finalized, more than 70% of the actual work was completed by Xingjing sect alone, including completing the array according to the diagram, pouring different attributes of pure magical power at the key nodes, and engraving the talismans on the mountain wall of the lofty mountain. Although in the eyes of many people, Xingjing sect's cultivators were nothing more than a group of arrogant nouveau riche, but since they could become the #1 sect in 9 regions, they naturally had their reasons. They didn't have as obvious characteristics as the other 4 super sects, but they won in all aspects. The overall cultivation of their disciples had no shortcomings. Whether it was the method system, body tempering, magical treasure, and even elixirs, Xingjing sect maintained a very high standard. Their comprehensive strength was really beyond the other four sections. Especially in the aspect of team organization and mobilization, they were even more powerful. Only the Royal Soldier sect could match them, but their comprehensive strength was far behind. However, even though the disciples of the several sects had come up with their real skills, the preparation work still took a full 3 days to come to an end. No less than 100,000 talismans were engraved on the lofty mountain, and they were connected by magical power ropes, which eventually converged at the foot of the mountain and froze into a mirror-like lake. The huge amount of work was enough to make those Taoist master-level cultivators of ordinary sects to lament their inadequacy. However, in the hands of this group of elite disciples of the 5 uniques, it was completed in 3 days. Good fortune meridian circulation was a marvelous immortal method that used an array to simulate the meridians of a living creature, completing the life energy cycle and thus stimulating its spirituality. The amount of magical power needed to activate the wisdom of a lofty mountain could be imagined, which was also the biggest difficulty in the plan. However, when they put it into practice, they found that it was a bit easier than expected. The magical power of Lingjian schools by Shixian was beyond everyone's imagination. She alone was equivalent to more than half of the group of Xingjing sect. The magical ability of Immortal Beast was really amazing. However, when the lofty mountain slightly trembled under the stimulation of the meridian circulation, causing the earth to shake, no one had the time to marvel at the power of Bai Shixian. Jiang Lu roared, "The Guardian has been resurrected, everyone prepare to fight." Chapter 234. This was a battle that was doomed to be unconventional. Even if the present cultivators were already the most elite group of the 5 uniques of the Union of 10,000 Immortals, their real strength was far beyond what they appeared to be on the surface, and any one of the sects had the power to destroy a city and destroy a country. Even if the Guardian had just been resurrected by the extremely brilliant meridian circulation method and was in its weakest moment, it still seemed too powerful for the disciples of the 4 sections. To defeat this behemoth head-on, one must at least have the magical ability of deity stage, which was far beyond the upper limit of the disciples of the 4 sections. However, to defeat a target, why would they need to do it head-on? A tough and powerful warrior might not be defeated by a heavy hammer or a long sword, but a meat dumpling, or a poisonous mushroom could bring his life to the end. Life, regardless of high or low, was powerful and fragile coexisting. As long as they found the right way to destroy it from the inside, perhaps with just a gentle push, it could make the building collapse. Therefore, the previous 3 days of arrangement of 100,000 talismans all over the mountain was not only to stimulate the life with the meridian circulation method, but more importantly, when the Guardian woke up from its slumber, these 100,000 talismans could reverse the meridian circulation, allowing the magical power to penetrate through the mountain's thick defense, directly extinguishing the vitality within its body, achieving the effect of internal destruction. Of course, achieving internal destruction was not easy. Bestowing life was one thing but plundering was another. After all, the Guardian was a higher life form. The moment its vitality bloomed, it would enter a perfect cycle, constantly healing itself, and expel the harmful existence out of its body. In Wang Lu's words, this was an endless struggle against the Guardian's immune system. Everyone get ready to fight. Jiang Lu's roar was like the roar of spring thunder, with an unquestionable strong penetrating force, which was still clearly audible in the midst of the landslide. However, there was no need for him to say it. Every cultivator of Xingjing sect in the first moment had found their own position. However, they didn't go straight to the sky to confront the Guardian head-on. Instead, they moved the battlefield to another location. They stood on the frozen lake, suppressing the more than 100,000 talismans that were reflected on the surface of the lake. On average, there were more than 4,000 mapping talismans under each person's feet. They needed to use their incomparably precise magic power to control each talisman precisely. It was like an extraordinarily skilled zither player, skillfully plucking the strings of the zither. For a moment, tens of thousands of starlight shone on the surface of the frozen lake, as if the Milky Way was reflecting itself. Meanwhile, innumerable ropes condensed from magical power extended from the surface of the ice to the mountain, faithfully transmitting the changes of the 100,000 talismans to the mountain. It was the latest artificial spirit object developed by the 10,000 Arts sect, the third type of spirit light guide cable or optical cable for short. It transmitted the signal by magical light, and then encoded and decoded it with a special algorithm. It had a very high transmission efficiency and anti-interference ability. Even in the great shaking of the world, it could still maintain the signal transmission without error. Only by gathering the 100,000 talismans on the lofty mountain could it be possible for one person to suppress 4,000 talismans. If that wasn't the case, how could 100,000 talismans resonate with just a few dozen people? While the cultivators of Xingjing sect were busy inputting the spirit light signal to guide the various abilities of the 100,000 talismans, the people of the 10,000 arts sect were nervously encoding and decoding the 100,000 signals. This kind of work not only required keen and delicate magical power control, but also required high-speed calculation, which only the people of the 10,000 arts sect could do. As for the cultivators of Kunlun sect, they formed a heavenly Tao reincarnation array in mid-air, giving full play to their profound advantage, continuously pouring down pure magical power and spiritual energy, so that the present cultivators wouldn't have to worry about magical power exhaustion. The three people of Lingjian school were the mobile force. In case of any accident, only they could deal with it. This task could be said to be difficult, because, according to the plan, the newly resurrected guardian should have no resistance to the erosion of the reverse meridian. However, it could be said to be easy. Once there was any mistake in the plan, with one slap from this mountain giant, even a peak king pill stage cultivator would be turned into meat paste. The division of the task had been very detailed, but the situation was still out of control in the first place. The moment the Xingjing sect cultivators launched the array, an irresistible resistance was transmitted along the optical fiber. Even though the guardian had just been resurrected and had no consciousness, only instinct, its subconscious struggle was still difficult to bear. At the same time, more than half of the cultivators of Xingjing sect were bleeding from their 7 orifices. Sitting in the center, Jianglu bore the brunt of the injury the most. Beads of blood oozed out from all the pores of his body, which then evaporated into mist due to the extremely high body temperature. His vitality rapidly passed away, but he didn't waver in the slightest. Instead, his body became more firm. Hold on. However, without needing Jianglu to say anything, the cultivators of Xingjing sect, as if by prior agreement, simultaneously burned their innate vitality. Xingjing sect's absolutely strong development strategy in 9 regions had repeatedly made them the most unpopular sect in the eyes of the various sects of the Wanxian League. However, in contrast to their wild posture, when they were needed to shoulder the responsibility, Xingjing sect was often duty-bound. Perhaps it was because of their absolute confidence in their own strength, or perhaps they just wanted to show off their prestige. In general, no matter how dissatisfied they were, it was undeniable that as the big brother of the Wanxian League, Xingjing sect's overall performance was absolutely qualified. However, relying solely on the desperate efforts of Xingjing sect cultivators was obviously not enough to shake the situation. How could dozens of ants do anything to the trampling of a giant elephant? Tiske, we already have something to do, let's get started. Seeing that the situation was beyond his expectation, Wang Lu, without any hesitation, flew straight to the sky with Lu Li and Bai Shixian. Then Bai Shixian made the first move. With the unique magical ability of the immortal beast moon spirit, she gained a resonance with all the living things in this world. As if declaring sovereignty over a piece of barren land, the current mountain spirit of the Grand Cloud Mountain easily spread the tentacles of his primordial spirit throughout the vast mountains. Then, in Bai Shixian's perception, a giant black shadow blotted out the sky and the earth, causing people to feel fear at first sight. That was the extremely weak guardian after its resurrection. Its primordial spirit was like a dried-up corpse that had been withered for tens of thousands of years, with a thick aura of death. However, even so, it was still a powerful enemy that no one could resist. Using primordial spirit to attack it would only make it die faster. Therefore, Bai Shixian, with her immortal beast magical ability, turned herself into a primordial spirit bridge to communicate with the guardian, not to injure or defeat it, but to lay the foundation for Wang Lu's next move. She gently put her primordial spirit on the body of the guardian. Because there was no hostility and her presence was too subtle, it didn't arouse the other party's response. Wang Lu coldly said, "Lu Li, prepare the brilliant rushing god sword." Lu Li has already entered the fighting state. Her 2 quick-witted eyes were as calm as ice. Upon hearing Wang Lu's command, her right hand pinched the sword sign and pressed it between her eyebrows, urging her primordial spirit to brew an astonishing sword intent. At this time, her primordial spirit cultivation base has already surpassed the half-virtual half-real stage. Coupled with the extreme strengthening of the brilliant sword heart, after this brilliant rushing god sword intent took shape, it seemed as if it was about to materialize. The surrounding cultivators with keen perception all felt a slight tingling pain. Go. The primordial spirit sword intent responded to the command and went straight to the vital part of the guardian along the bridge that Bai Shirshan had set up. The power of this sword strike alone was enough to make the nearby 10,000 arts sect cultivators feel a splitting headache. Moreover, the brilliant rushing god sword intent was enough to defeat the primordial spirit of any of the people present. My goodness! Jianglu, Wang Yuel, Wanyu, Zhan Zai and the others all felt a chill in their hearts. This Lu Li turned out to have such a killer move. This extremely pure sword intent was sharper and more difficult to guard against than her fire-weak water sword and other 5-element swords. In the future, if they were to encounter it. However, this distraction was only for a moment. The heavy burden on their shoulders did not allow them to be distracted. The pressure from the guardian was not reduced by the slightest bit. Lu Li's earth-shattering sword intent rushed forward, but it was like a stone sinking into the sea. How strong was the primordial spirit of this guardian? However, Wang Lu was still calm. His primordial spirit was connected with Bai Shirshan and Lu Li. Just now, the effect of the brilliant rushing god sword was still there. Resuscitation of the guardian. Although the original guardian was resurrected, its primordial spirit was hazy and still in a coma. All of its actions relied on instinct. However, Lu Li's earth-shattering brilliant rushing god sword intent had the same effect as an alarm clock, which suddenly woke it up. And this was enough. What Wang Lu wanted was for it to wake up, because only a resuscitation of the guardian could possibly reveal a flaw. Lu Li used the brilliant sword language to help me pass the following message. Sword language was not the unique skill of his big sister Zhu Shiyao. Lu Li, whose talent in the way of the sword was also at the peak, also had the ability to use sword language. Moreover, her sword language was easier to understand than Zhu Shiyao's, so it didn't need the other side to have the talent in the way of the sword to understand. And now, the trump card that Wang Lu had prepared was Lu Li's sword language. Using Bai Shirshuan's magical ability to build a bridge and the brilliant rushing god sword intent to awaken the guardian, all in order to let it hear their conversation. As long as there was an opportunity for communication, the space available was too big. Azure, I'll say it later and you'll use the sword language to relay it. During the process, I want you to circulate the clear heart mantra at the same time and calm your mind. You don't have to think about the meaning of what I say. You just have to pass it straight to the guardian. Okay. Although there were thousands of doubts in her heart, and she couldn't understand the intention of Wang Lu's instruction, Lu Li didn't ask a single word. Without hesitation, she nodded and began to use the clear heart technique. Suddenly, her clear heart seemed to be covered with frost and snow, becoming cold and tranquil, showing an unprecedented state of emptiness. Then, hearing Wang Lu's primordial spirit transmission, Lu Li, without hesitation, relied on her instinctive understanding and turned it into the brilliant sword language. Then, with a wave of her slender hand, she stimulated the sword intent and passed the following content to the guardian word for word. Grandson. Your AF * King F * Cur. Your mother was beeped by a dog. You came out of the beep. Your beep was beeped by a beep. An indescribable viciousness was transmitted through the channel of the primordial spirit in the form of sword language. After a moment of silence, the guardian released a world-destroying fury. It was a roar that came directly from her primordial spirit, the supreme heart fire. And at the moment when the heart fire set the prairie ablaze, Bai Shirshan very cleverly hid her primordial spirit between the mountains and the earth, avoiding being caught in the crossfire. As for Lu Li, who directly faced the wrath of the guardian. Hey, you want to hurt someone in front of me? A dazzling golden sword shadow, like an eternally motionless mountain rock, unwaveringly isolated the boundless heart fire of the guardian. Like an eyesore that blocked the way, it protected Lu Li behind him. This was also a sword of the essence soul. Wang Lu had recently mastered it, the formless immovable sword. Receiving the perfect protection from Wang Lu, Lu Li was oblivious to everything around her. While urging the Clear Heart Sutra, she continued to talk according to the content of the sound transmission from Wang Lu. You're a beep, your mother is a beep, your father is a beep, and your master is also a beep. The primordial spirit fire was blocked outside, and the vicious voice continued. The guardian was boiling with anger. All of its attention was focused on Wang Lu and Lu Li. This split second of distraction broke the balance that was originally maintained by instinct, which immediately affected the state of the body. There's a flaw. Jiang Lu, who was standing in the front line, and Zhan Zai, who was constantly monitoring the state and deducing the data, simultaneously roared. The next moment, the light on the ice lake suddenly intensified several times. Everyone, regardless of everything, seized this rare flaw and launched an unprecedented fierce offensive with 100,000 talismans. Chapter 235. In his 10 years of immortal cultivation, this was the first time that Wang Lu encountered a strong opponent that was truly suitable for a professional adventurer. First, the opponent's strength was strong enough. If it was a fair fight in the arena, even 100 Wang Lu wouldn't be able to stop the Guardian's attack. Second, the opponent's weakness was obvious enough. With the 100,000 talismans reverse meridian circulation method, the magical power directly penetrated into the Guardian's body. Third, the opponent's weakness was stupid enough. Because it had just been resurrected, the Guardian's primordial spirit was confused, and its mind was in chaos. It simply couldn't think like a normal creature, and its earth-shattering power couldn't be displayed. Moreover, it was easy to be calculated by some simple and ridiculous tricks. If it were any normal opponent, it would be impossible for them to fall into an irrepressible rage because of dirty words. However, after hearing the sword language, the Guardian ignored the great crisis of the 100,000 talismans invasion on its body and set off the monstrous heart fire to deal with Lu Li. And Wang Lu propped up his non-phase unmovable heart sword, firmly blocking the way, motionless like a mountain. However, the Guardian unexpectedly didn't know how to change its target. It still locked on Lu Li and continued to urge the heart fire to push and spread forward. Although its power was impressive, it was not aimed at Wang Lu, therefore Wang Lu was able to resist it with ease. In professional terms, this was the magical effect of blocking position. Taunting, blocking position, pulling the hatred, this was the entire job of the three people of Lingjian school. As a mobile force, Wang Lu didn't need to fight the Guardian to the death. He just needed to create the output condition for the rest of his teammates. And his teammates didn't let him down. Xingjing sect, Kunlun sect, and 10,000 Arts sect people jointly exerted their strength. Under the infusion of powerful magical power, the 100,000 talismans were stimulated one by one, creating one strong destruction after another in the Guardian's body. The Guardian's body continued to tremble, and cracks appeared on the surface of the mountain. Not long after, it seemed to be covered with a vast layer of spider web. Gravel and sand slid down like a waterfall, and the Guardian's body seemed to be surrounded by a layer of grayish-yellow mist. Of course, the destruction inside the mountain was 100 times more intense than on the surface. However, the Guardian turned a blind eye to this, because in its ignorant knowledge, its greatest hatred was not the pain in its body, but the vicious curse that the little bug transmitted through the sharp sword language. Unfortunately, its ignorant mind could not allow it to think too much, so it only clumsily activated the heart fire, trying to burn the sword language and the little bug, completely ignoring the fact that its body was rapidly falling apart. The stalemate lasted for a long time. Although the destructive power of the 100,000 talismans was very powerful, the Guardian's vitality was equally astonishing. It turned out that the disciples of the four sects had underestimated the Guardian's strength. The people of Lingjian school had played a role beyond expectation. Wang Lu, with his professional adventurer's means, firmly attracted the Guardian's attention. As for the rest of the people, they only needed to concentrate on the reverse meridian circulation method to destroy the Guardian's vitality. It stood to reason that if everything went well they should be able to kill it soon. However, no one thought that the Guardian had just been resurrected and was on the verge of death. They obviously had 3 days of arrangement and 100,000 talismans to magnify the destructive power of the cultivators by thousands of times, but in the end, when Jianglu and the others were almost exhausted, the Guardian fell down with a loud bang. With the continuous accumulation of internal destruction, the Guardian's vitality finally came to an end. From the top of the mountain, a large amount of lava and dust gushed out and went straight to the sky, and then the mountain was quickly covered with a layer of gray color. The mountain suddenly stopped, and its height was compressed by a section. At this point the battle ended. Everyone felt a burst of amazement. According to the original plan, all the arrangements had a considerable amount of surplus, and the margin of error was very high. However, the actual situation was that the margin of error in killing the Guardian was almost zero. Even the Lingjian school had to perform exceptionally to barely take down the opponent. Among them, if there was a slight mistake in any of the links, the result would be total annihilation. What a terrifying opponent. Feeling the signal from the ice lake array that the Guardian's vitality was gone, Jianglu finally breathed a sigh of relief. He then wiped the black blood from his mouth and nose and sincerely sighed with emotion. The Guardian's vitality was simply unimaginable. Perhaps in the Wanxian League, even in the Royal Soldier sect, which was famous for its powerful body, only a few people could be comparable to it. Fortunately, they didn't need to be enemies with the Guardian at its peak. However, even so, the cultivators of the four sects had to cooperate with each other in order to barely pass this test. While recollecting the battle just now, Jianglu had to admit that it was impossible to defeat this guardian by relying on the strength of Xingjing sect alone, and this was just the fourth level of the Sword Tomb. The cooperation of the four sects seemed to be just a joke at first, but since the difficulty of the Sword Tomb far exceeded the expectation, even if they joined forces with the other three sects, it was also a good choice. In the battle just now, although the main force was Xingjing sect, the role of any other sect was pivotal. Thinking to this, Jianglu changed his original overbearing attitude and said, "Everyone take a break and restore your magical power as soon as possible. If any of the fellow Taoists here has been injured by the resonance just now, we have the best healing elixir here, please feel free to use it." Although his tone was still somewhat superior, it was rare for Xingjing sect to show such a generous attitude, so the cultivators of Kunlun sect and 10,000 Arts sect had no reason to refuse. After exchanging greetings for a while, they became friends with each other, and the atmosphere gradually warmed up. Only the people of Lingjian school were still maverick, coldly hiding on the side, completely not participating in the greetings. Just now, in the fierce battle, Wang Lu and the other two people took great credit. However, under the protection of Nanfei's sword, the three of them were actually unscathed. Compared to the bleak Xingjing sect people, they were simply noble and elegant. Their number was the smallest, but their style seemed to be stronger than Xingjing sect people. Jianglu cast a glance at them and inwardly sneered. The people of Lingjian school indeed had some means, but even Xingjing sect people could put down their arrogance when needed. If they were so maverick in the joint action of the four sects, they would only end up being isolated. Of course, in the action they might not deliberately frame each other, but in the final distribution of the spoils, the isolated party would definitely suffer a big loss. However, this was a misunderstanding. Wang Lu and the others had important things to discuss. "Lu Li, you said you found something, what do you mean?" Lu Li earnestly said, "At the last moment before the Guardian's life was cut off, I clearly felt that it seemed to have released two different but equally strong emotions to me. It seemed to be regret but also relief like. Lu Li awkwardly wrinkled her brows. She wanted to describe it more vividly, but found that her ability to express it was somewhat unable to keep up. Wang Lu was silent for a moment and then tried to explain, resuscitation after thousands of years of sleep, but before it could experience more of life, it was sent into the darkness again. Of course there would be regret. As for relief, it should have died a long time ago, it's just that it couldn't die thoroughly. Now that it's dead thoroughly, perhaps it could re-enter the reincarnation cycle, which is not bad, so it's relieved." For such an explanation, Lu Li found it difficult to understand, and even more difficult to accept, but she didn't know what to say. In the silence, Bai Shixian expressed her opinion. "Senior brother, I think we shouldn't kill it." Wang Lu asked, "What's the reason?" Bai Shixian said, "Because it didn't do anything bad. The hare and pheasant didn't do anything bad, but they still ended up in the human stomach. This is the law of nature, so it can't explain anything. But, in general, do you think I did something wrong?" Bai Shixian hesitated. "Not really. It's just that I always feel that this guardian is really pitiful. Perhaps it's because we're both mountain spirits. Sorry, I'm a bit confused." Wang Lu also touched her head. "Don't think too much. Although you're born smart, not hopelessly stupid like little Lu Li, it's still too early for you to think about these things." Lu Li protested, "I'm not stupid." Wang Lu looked at Lu Li. "Really? Then I'll give you a question. If you can figure it out, then you're smart. Prove that any even number greater than 2 can be expressed as the sum of two prime numbers. Okay, take your time to think about it." Okay. Then, ignoring Lu Li, Wang Lu also fell into deep thought. This is only the 4th level, but the difficulty has already broken the limit. Is there a problem with the way to play or? However, just when Wang Lu vaguely grasped something, suddenly, a burst of roar of rolling rocks surged. A strong shock came from under their feet, causing everyone to simultaneously stop their conversation and turn their eyes to the mountain not far away. As the guardian's corpse, after the lava erupted and the mountain shrunk, the mountain took on a gray color. Everyone thought that this was the end, but unexpectedly, there was another change. The mountain suddenly swayed, causing a violent earthquake in a radius of dozens of miles. And the cracks on the surface of the mountain, driven by an unknown force, continued to expand. Then the earth suddenly bent down as if a hole was opened at the foot of the mountain. The whole mountain sunk down at a jaw-dropping speed. Even the volcanic ash that spewed into the sky fell back. In just a moment, all that was left in front of everyone was a plain, as well as a clear sky. That towering mountain seemed to have never existed. Jianglu looked around in bewilderment and guessed, "Is this a sign that the door to the next level is about to open?" Zhou somewhat dejectedly said, "That big guy is useless, so he died without a whole corpse?" Zhan Zai excitedly guessed, "Is this the internal recycling mechanism of the sword tomb?" Unexpectedly, the cultivators from more than 10,000 years ago have such an advanced idea. This is a very important discovery, and it's necessary to revise the relevant records. While they were talking, suddenly on the plain where the mountain disappeared, 8 stone doors appeared in a circle. Each stone door was engraved with a simple and unadorned character. Although after thousands of years the characters had changed a lot, there was no lack of knowledgeable people present so they could recognize them at a glance. Filial piety, fraternity, loyalty, faith, propriety, righteousness, integrity, and shame. Chapter 236. Filial piety, loyalty, faith, propriety, righteousness, honor, and shame? When they saw these 8 words, the people present were stunned. Even those with relatively weak knowledge knew that these 8 words were the 8 virtues of the 9 regions that had been passed down for more than 10,000 years, the 8 virtues put forward by the sages a long time ago. But at this time the 8 virtues appeared. Could it be that the master of this sword tomb was the great sage who put forward the 8 virtues? That couldn't be, right? They never heard that the great sage was a sword cultivator. Then what were these 8 doors? Did they have to find the most important one among the 8 doors in order to enter the next level? But these 8 virtues were not superior or inferior. Or did they have to randomly choose one as long as they felt confident in that one? While many of the cultivators were in doubt, that indifferent and stiff voice once again sounded in everyone's mind. The legacy of the sword god should not be passed on to the heretical path, and the successor should have good virtues. However, morality changes with the times, changes with the situation. In times of peace, people are gentle, kind, respectful, and thrifty. In troubled times of war, there are people who exchange their children for food. I don't know what the world will be like after thousands of years, and what morality will be like. However, I know that virtue is relative. Therefore, based on the 8 virtues of the sages, I set up 8 tests. The one with the most virtues wins and the winner passes. The one with the most virtues wins and the winner passes? There was a lot of information in this paragraph, and the most important part was the last 2 sentences. 8 gates, 8 virtues. The person who occupied more of them would be able to pass. For a moment, everyone fell into deep thought and no one said a word. After a while, Hai Yunfan of the 10,000 Arts sect shook his head and exclaimed, "What a powerful senior. He actually designed the knockout test. He's really a master at grasping people's mind." Wang Lu chuckled. Yes, they really have grasped the key of morality. There is comparison, there is morality. To be able to enter this ancient sword tomb and reach this point, whether it's in the past or now, they must be the elite of that time. Using them as the moral yardstick, the difference would not be too far. Then, a competition mechanism is established to select the relatively higher moral character from these people, which is indeed easier to select the real moral role model. Hai Yunfan said, "That's right. Perhaps in some turbulent times, when etiquette is broken, people's hearts are evil, and there are no saints in the world, but as long as one has a little more virtue than the people around him, it's enough. This is really an excellent social problem and it's worth studying." The cultivators of the 10,000 Arts sect nodded. Among them Yi Feifei Zhao Jiangyuan, and the others were eager to give it a try. They couldn't wait to consult the ancient books and establish the model. Jianglu of Xingjing sect couldn't stand it anymore. He coldly snorted and interrupted, "Is this the time to admire? The victors would pass. In other words, the losers would not pass. How many victors were there in this round? How many people do we have here? 30? 40? Zhou also said, "This checkpoint is really strange. Why did they have to design this kind of competition mechanism? Must someone be eliminated first?" As soon as these words were spoken, the atmosphere instantly froze. Zhou was a straightforward person, so she inadvertently pointed out a sensitive topic. After all, the 4 sects were not of one mind. Just now, in the fight with the Guardian, they finally established a cooperative relationship. However, in this sword tomb steal, the one with the most virtues would win, which made the cooperative relationship seem precarious. If there was a win, there would be a loss. After this round, someone would inevitably be eliminated. Moreover, it was very likely that most people would be eliminated. Thus, what kind of cooperation was there? After a while, Jianglu inwardly made a decision and coldly said, "Humph, that's fine. In any case, in the end, someone would be eliminated." Zhan Zai said, that's not necessarily true. There are 8 sects here and we have 4 sections. If we do a simple division, as long as each sect gets 2 virtues, wouldn't we be able to pass the test together? Jianglu ridiculed, you people of 10,000 Art sect always boast of being smart, but how come you don't use your brain when you speak? If we can pass the test by equal distribution, aren't we also equal now? Each side has 0 virtues, so why don't we see the next door open? Zhan Zai was suddenly at a loss for words. Jianglu's countenance turned serious as he said in a sinking voice, the inheritance of this sword tomb is not a gentle and amiable child's play. From the second level of the sword tomb, it's full of killing intent. Just now, in the fight with the Guardian, we were almost wiped out. After experiencing this, don't tell me you still can't see our situation? If we want to continue to move forward, we must have the awareness to overcome all obstacles, to break our heads and bleed and even to perish. This trial of the 8 virtues will definitely require us to fight and fight, just like how the primal land rears goo and trample on the corpses of others to obtain victory. This theory was indeed persuasive, but there were also many people who disagreed. Yi Feifei couldn't help but open her mouth to argue. However, before they could say anything, Wang Lu lightly said, we haven't even pushed the door open, what's the use of just talking at the door? How the owner of this sword tomb wants to play, none of us can say it. Moreover, just because of the words of the owner of the sword tomb, a line of words on the steel, our 4 sects have to fight each other at the door, don't you think it's stupid? At least let's go in and take a look first. Jianglu glanced at Wang Lu, nodded, and said, yes, at present we only know that the one with the most wins, but the specific rules are vague. We should go in and take a look first. Behind these 8 doors are 8 tests, why don't we start from the first one? With that, Jianglu pointed at the filial piety door. Wang Lu said, filial piety is the first of all virtues. I wonder which filial son or grandson would like to come with me to take a look? The scene briefly froze. Naturally, no one wanted to be a filial son or grandson, so no one answered his question. Jianglu coldly humphed. We don't know anything about the situation behind the door, so there's no need to send out all of our troops. I suggest that each sect send out 1/3 of their people while the rest stay here. Wang Lu was the first to agree, no objection. Seeing Wang Lu's attitude, the people of 10,000 Arts sect thought for a moment and then agreed. Although Zhou Mumu had doubts, she could only follow. Very well, then please send out your people. Jiang Lu said, and then turned to his assistants, Wang Yue brother and sister, and said, Luan Yun, you two lead the team to go in and take a look at the situation. If there's any change, save your life first. The 2 siblings said yes in unison, and then selected 6 cultivators to form a team. According to the 1/3 ratio, Xingjing sect's team of 8 people was just right. Kunlun sect's team was formed by Zhou Mumu and a middle-aged cultivator, while 10,000 Arts sect's team was formed by Hai Yunfan and Yi Feifei. As for Lingjian school, according to the ratio, there was only 1 person. However, Wang Lu directly pointed at Lu Li, indicating that the 2 of them should go together. Jiang Lu just cast a glance at Bai Shixian and didn't say anything. After all, Lingjian school was weak, so 1 more person or 1 less person wouldn't affect the overall situation. Xingjing sect, whether it was inside or outside, had the strength to suppress everything by hard means. Moreover, from another point of view, Wang Lu's willingness to leave Bai Shixian alone here was also a good thing for Xingjing sect. Although Bai Shixian's magical ability was astonishing, she was not good at fighting. Although she had far more vigorous magical power than any of the people present, in a real fight, Jianglu was confident that he could defeat her within 3 moves. Staying here as a hidden hostage was also a good thing. Very well, since the members have been decided, let's get ready to open the gate. Not wanting to delay any longer, Jianglu immediately urged. Everyone didn't delay and directly walked toward the filial piety gate. Along the way, Hai Yunfan and Wang Lu's eyes gently touched, and then as if by prior agreement, they simultaneously smiled. A few days ago, the covenant between the 2 of them was finally going to play its role. Actually, what Jianglu said just now was right. In the Sword Tomb's inheritance trial, each level seemed cold and ruthless. Perhaps it was really like raising a poisonous insect, where the participants would fight each other to the death in order to determine the final winner. However, it's good that you're clear about this in your heart, why bother saying it out loud? Xingjing sect was the only big sect, and if they really fought, none of the other sects would be their opponent. Thus, the situation would inevitably force the other 3 sects to join forces. What Xingjing sect relied on was nothing more than being driven by the environment. The other 3 sects also had to scheme against each other, and thus couldn't cooperate in good faith. In fact, from the point of view of the vast majority of cases in which the weak joined forces against the strong, most of them ended in the victory of the strong. There was no other reason than those who would rather fight against the flood than to give up the immediate benefits were the mainstream in history. Perhaps there were bystanders who sighed with emotion. How could those people be so stupid? And in fact they were that stupid. However, this time Jianglu miscalculated. At least, the foundation of the cooperation between Spirit Sword Sect and 10,000 Arts Sect was very solid. There was no infighting. Because Hai Yunfan had long made up his mind to listen to Wang Lu's instructions from the beginning to the end, without any second thoughts. A few days ago the importance of the covenant was perfectly reflected. The most important one was that the final benefit should be divided according to the contribution of each party. In other words, even if only one person reached the end and got all the benefits according to the covenant, he would have to distribute it to the other teammates who fell in front of him. If it was difficult to distribute the treasure, the sect would compensate. Therefore Hai Yunfan didn't care about who could reach the end. If the 10,000 Arts Sect could pass, it would naturally be good. If not, it would be a good choice to fully cooperate with Wang Lu to strive for victory and then sit back and wait for the bonus. And based on the current situation, the best choice for the 10,000 Arts Sect was to trust the judgment of Wang Lu. No matter how many disputes he had, Wang Lu had never tore up the covenant. On the contrary, he was a man of his word, and he always took care of his own people. In fact, in Hai Yunfan's view, among the 8 virtues, Wang Lu had at least occupied 2 of them. It was just that, judging from the situation of this sword tomb trial, perhaps it wouldn't be easy to win the 2 virtues. Before long the group of people arrived at the front of the stone door. The stone door rumbled open, revealing a deep and bottomless dark passage. "I'll go first." Wang Lu lifted the sword of Mount Kuan, and his non-phase sword light bloomed as he rushed to enter the door. Wang Yu and Wang Yun of Xingjing sect slightly hesitated, but they didn't immediately stop him. After all, no one knew what the world behind the door was like. Was it a test of the heart demon illusion or something else? Since Wang Lu was willing to act as the vanguard, and his non-phase sword was also famous for being good at defense, it would be good for him to explore the way. After Wang Lu, it was naturally Lu Li Xingjing sect and finally Kunlun Immortal sect and 10,000 Arts sect. After the group of people entered the stone door, the thick slate slowly closed, covering the dark passage. It also cut off the connection between inside and outside. However, no one was surprised by this. In the passage Wang Lu took the lead. However, after walking for a while, there were no guardians blocking the way, nor were there any sinister traps. The front of the passage gradually opened up until the end, where a narrow stone chamber was the end. The stone chamber was not big, and the situation inside was clear at a glance. When Wang Lu looked inside, he immediately exclaimed, "What the F***ck?" Chapter 237. What the hell? Hearing Wang Lu's exclamation, the team behind him immediately tensed up. Wang Lu's non-phase sword was famous for its good defense. In terms of defense and vitality, even the most arrogant Xingjing sect people didn't dare to say that they could surpass Wang Lu. Coupled with his quick-wittedness and reputation as a professional adventurer, having him as the vanguard was the safest. And if there was a scene that could make Wang Lu exclaim in surprise, perhaps it would be quite a scene. Needless to say, the Xingjing sect cultivators behind Wang Lu immediately entered their combat state. Wang Yue brother and sister simultaneously took out their 7 orifices, multicolored treasure chest. The rest of the cultivators each took out their magical treasures. This team of 8 people without exception had a low-rank spiritual treasure. "Brother Wang, what's going on?" Hai Yunfan, who was at the end of the team, immediately asked. Wang Lu waved his hand and loudly said, "Don't panic, it's not a life-threatening situation." With that, he waited for everyone to slowly withdraw from their combat state before he added, "But, it's likely to be another form of life-threatening situation." With that, Wang Lu stepped aside from the exit, allowing the others to come forward and see the scene inside the stone room. Wang Yu and her brother looked at each other and then took a step forward. The woman was dressed in a 7-colored feather dress, and her figure was as agile as a spirit bird. However, after entering the stone room, this agile woman only took a glance inside, and a moment later, her eyes widened as she incredulously covered her mouth and exclaimed, What is this?" Everyone rushed in one after another, and seeing the scene inside the stone room, all of them were surprised. Even if they encountered a supreme-level guardian here, they wouldn't be surprised, or they would suddenly fall into a big dream, which was also very normal. However, there was nothing in the stone room, only a stone table, and on the table, there were 2 piles of metal cards that shone with a mysterious luster. The 2 piles of round cards were written in ancient characters, parents, and children, which seemed to show an ominous meaning. And above the metal cards, a string of strangely shaped characters were engraved on the stone wall, which could be translated as follows: Rules 1. The trial procedure is as follows: 1. The trial taker can freely choose a parent card and designate one person to wear a child card. 2. The holder of the parent card must nurture the designated holder of the child card and gift the item with the highest value to the other party. 3. The holder of the children's card who receives the gift must return an item of double or more value to his parents. This process can be regarded as filial piety. 4. The trial taker who has fulfilled filial piety will be qualified to pass. 2. Relevant requirements. 1. Parents and children must correspond to one another, not one to many or many to one. 2. Once the identity card is selected, it will be completely bound and cannot be changed. 3. Each person has and can only have one identity card. 4. Parenting and filial piety can only be performed once. Once one party refuses to perform the parenting or filial piety, it will be regarded as giving up the trial. The process of nurturing and filial piety is irreversible, and gifts cannot be recovered. 6. Any act that violates the rules of the trial will be regarded as a violation of the rules and will be disqualified. The rules were not long, but after reading the rules, everyone cursed in their hearts. What was going on? Zhou was the most puzzled. What kind of filial piety trial is this? Wang Lu also sighed. The owner of the sword tomb must have lived in an era with distorted values. How could he design such a ridiculous rule? Regardless of whether it reflects filial piety or not, as soon as this rule comes out, half of the people will be directly cut off. Some people who were slow in thinking asked subconsciously, cut off half of the people? Wang Lu said, look carefully, only filial piety can pass the trial. Only children can be filial piety. Children and parents correspond to one another. It is clear that those who choose the parent card will be eliminated. A few people who were quick to take the round card suddenly stopped and understood. Yes, parents chose the parent card. As parents, how can they be filial piety? Regardless of whether they had thought of this before or not, after listening to Wang Lu's explanation of the rules, they all had their own ideas and began to be silent. While everyone was silent, Wang Lu said, however, being eliminated is not entirely a bad thing. According to the rules, those who choose the parent card will get twice the gift from their children. This will undoubtedly make a lot of money, which can be regarded as compensation for being eliminated. Seeing everyone's thoughtful look, Wang Lu smirked and said, if there is a sinister person, you can also use this parent card as a license to plunder. For example, if I fancy fellow Taoist Xingjing sect's yin and yang treasure chest, and I only want the low-rank spiritual treasure sword of Mount Kuan as a gift, fellow Taoist Xingjing sect must return it with double the value, and I can get that middle-rank spiritual treasure. Isn't that very profitable? Don't even think about it. The Wangyue siblings angrily shouted in unison. Aha, of course I'm just joking. I also like my family's sword of Mount Kuan, so I don't intend to give up. With that, Wang Lu continued to size up the Xingjing sect's cultivators with malicious intent. Then, from another point of view, this is also a shortcut for the local tyrants to spend money to pass this trial. You see, in this trial, half of the people must be eliminated, but no one wants to be the other half, right? Although as children, to fulfill their filial piety, no one here is a poor ghost, right? Everyone has to compete, each using their own means. Who dares to say that they will be able to laugh in the end? However, if some people are willing to pay enough price, perhaps they can avoid a lot of pointless fights and safely pass this trial. The Xingjing sect's cultivators looked at each other and chose to be silent. Although Wang Lu's statement was malicious, if one carefully thought about it, there was nothing wrong with it. Right now, in this filial piety trial, regardless of whether it had anything to do with filial piety from the point of view of passing this trial, it was indeed very cruel. There was no room for debate. Because of the rules, half of the people who participated in the trial would be directly eliminated. However, at this time it seemed like, for the sake of insurance, Xingjing sect sent 8 people to enter the trial, but this time they were caught in their own trap. The 4 sects had a total of 14 people, so the maximum number of people who could pass the trial was 7. Even if they could suppress the other 3 sects, making Wang Lu and the others have no choice but to hold the parent card and give up the trial, the quota was still not enough. Wangyue's siblings communicated with each other through primordial spirit. Wanyun said, "Sister, what do you think?" "I think there's no problem with Wang Lu's statement, at least on the surface. Let's think of a way to make the other 3 sects give up. As for our own problem, Let junior brother Ting sacrifice himself. However, Guan Yu didn't dare to think of things so lightly. Our own problem is easy to discuss, and it's not difficult for us to distribute it. I'm afraid that there's a conspiracy behind what Wang Lu just said. The rules of this filial piety trial are too strange and people can't understand it. Although on the surface, as long as we find half of the people who will be sacrificed, we can let the other half pass. However, those three sects are not easy to deal with. How could they be willing to hold the parent card and give up the trial? Under this rule, coercion by force doesn't have much significance. After they hold the parent card, if they don't designate our people, we can't do anything about it. Guan Yun said, then we can lure them with benefits. As long as we show our Xingjing sect's unwillingness to give up, coupled with sufficient compensation, they have no reason to be stubborn. They're not like those royal soldier sect who don't know what's good for them and can't distinguish right from wrong. As long as they're willing to talk about benefits, I think we can always give them a price tag that's enough to convince them. Guan Yu was still somewhat hesitant, so Guan Yun urged, Sister, senior brother Jianglu has full trust in us, that's why he let us lead the team. Moreover, looking at the situation of this filial piety trial, it's very likely that the filial piety trial won't open for the second time. In other words, the people outside are doomed to not get one of the 8 virtues of filial piety. Upon hearing this, Guan Yu also slowly nodded. Yes, our Xingjing sect team lineup is strong, but at this time, we are at a disadvantage. Because of a moment of caution, senior brother Jianglu and several other junior brothers and sisters whose strength is at the top of the list have lost their virtue. On the other hand, Kunlun sect and Spirit Sword sect, although the number of people is small, their core members didn't miss the opportunity. In this 8 virtues trial, the outcome is likely to be 1 or 2 virtues. The disadvantage of losing the initiative is really terrible. Guan Yun said, right now we have no way to open the door to let senior brother Jianglu come in, but we can at least make Zhou Mumu, Wang Lu and the others lose the initiative. Everyone is still on the same starting line. Very well then, let's do it. While the Wang Yue siblings were discussing the countermeasures, the people from the other 3 sects were not idle. Hai Yun Fan, on behalf of the 10,000 Arts sect, was the first to show his stance. Through primordial spirit he said, Brother Wang, please guide us. Wang Lu was both angry and amused as he scolded, Little Hai, can't you have some dignity? Your senior sister Yi is still watching from the side. If you keep being so humble, when will you be able to win the beauty's hand? Regarding this kind of joke, Hai Yun Fan now has a very high resistance. He indifferently smiled. In this kind of test, it's really shameful to want to keep face. Isn't it normal to ask a professional for guidance on something that you're not good at? Moreover, since the mountain worship meeting 5 years ago, Brother Wang has some weight in the hearts of us martial brothers and sisters. Senior sister Fei Fei has no objection to your guidance. In fact, even the people of Kunlun sect have entrusted me to communicate with you. Wang Lu laughed. It seems like the pressure from Xingjing sect is really not small. Yes, and just now, I have hinted the matter of our 2 sects' alliance to Zhou Mumu, and she is quite moved. Wang Lu said, it's certainly good to have the intention to cooperate. However, let me say it first, if you want my help, I can. But first, I'm not like big sister Zhu Shiyao, so I can't guarantee a foolproof victory. So, if there's a mistake, if you fail, don't come crying. Second, you must have 100% trust in me, otherwise please find a way yourself. Hai Yun Fan said, rest assured, I have this awareness. Good, then you just need to remember one thing. Do your best to fight for the children card. Hai Yun Fan gawked. Do I really want to fight for the children card? Isn't that nonsense? If I don't fight for the children card, how can I be filial? Hai Yun Fan explained, the main thing is, according to my understanding of Brother Wang, just now you said those high-sounding words, but your real intention is likely to be reversed. However, since Brother Wang said so, then we'll try our best to fight for it. It's just that, according to the rules, isn't the children card designated by the parents' card? If you can't directly fight for the children card, then strive to let other people get the parents' card, and then designate you as the children card. With that, Wang Lu slightly sneered. Just like what Xingjing sect is about to do. Hai Yun Fan sighed. Unexpectedly, the test after the filial piety gate actually evolved into such a situation. What kind of era of destruction did the master of this sword tomb live in? Yes, the parents' card is directly out of the game while the children card can pass. It's called filial piety, but it's actually a fraud. Chapter 238. After Wang Lu ended his conversation with Hai Yun Fan, the silent atmosphere in the stone chamber was quickly broken. Wang Yu of Xingjing sect took half a step forward. As her figure moved, her willowy eyebrows slightly raised, her delicate facial features stretched out, and her agile temperament suddenly turned sharp. Wang Lu. The woman spoke coldly, and her voice carried a trace of unquestionable iciness. Earlier you said that if some people were willing to pay a sufficient price, they would be able to avoid many pointless battles and safely pass through this trial, right? Now that my Xingjing sect is willing to pay enough price, I wonder if you are willing to avoid the unnecessary fight? Wang Lu gawked for a moment. Your Xingjing sect's method of negotiation is really simple and crude. Wang Yuanyu said, yes, the Xingjing sect is determined to win this first pass of the 8 virtues. There are a total of 14 people from the 4 sects, but only 7 people can pass this pass. We have already discussed it internally. Junior brother Ting Fei will sacrifice himself to hold the parent card. However, the remaining 7 parent cards will have to be handled by Kunlun sect, 10,000 Arts sect, and Spirit Sword sect. As soon as these words came out, the atmosphere in the stone room immediately became somewhat tense. This Wang Yuanyu usually looked light and graceful, but who would have thought that the moment she opened her mouth, she would be so domineering? Compared to her senior brother Power King, she was not much inferior. There were only 7 spots in the first pass of the 8 virtues, yet Xingjing sect unexpectedly did not intend to give up any of them. How could the other 3 sects endure this? Of course, although Xingjing sect was overbearing, they were not robbers. With that, Wang Yuanyu paused for a moment, and then added, of course Xingjing sect will not let you suffer a loss, there will be enough compensation. Zhou Mumu angrily said, compensation? What a big tone. I want to hear how much price your Xingjing sect can pay to dare to ask us to give up the inheritance of the sword tomb. Wang Yuanyu said, what a joke. When did this sword tomb inheritance become the possession of your Kunlun Immortal Mountain? You make it sound like if you don't give up, others won't be able to get it. Whether you admit it or not, in this sword tomb expedition among the 4 sects, my Xingjing sect has the biggest chance of winning. All we want is for the process to be more stable and peaceful. Exchanging benefits is always better than fighting to the death. Of course, if you refuse to accept, you must shed all pretense of cordiality. Xingjing sect is not afraid of anyone. In that case, fellow Taoist Zhou Mumu, are you prepared for war? Do you have the awareness to challenge my Xingjing sect? While speaking, Wang Yuanyu's imposing manner became increasingly swift and fierce. Her rainbow-colored feather dress blossomed with a dazzling and sharp brilliance, and the nimble feathers at the hem of her skirt trembled like blades. For a moment, the red-crowned crane transformed into a golden eagle, and a murderous aura assaulted everyone's faces. Zhou Mumu raised her eyebrows, not to be outdone. She came from Kunlun Immortal Sect, the ancestor of the Immortal Path in 9 regions. When had she ever been provoked like this? Let's fight then. Do you think I'm afraid of you? A mere 17th-ranked successor disciple dares to be so arrogant? If it was your Qianghua, then it would be more appropriate. Just as his voice fell, he heard Wang Yuanyun's mocking voice, ha! Do you think you deserve to name senior sister Qianghua? No wonder Kunlun Immortal Mountain is the ancestor of the Immortal Tao, but it is declining day by day. Its disciples simply do not know the immensity of heaven and earth. Zhou Mumu's anger flared up. She immediately unleashed her life-source spiritual treasure, the Origin Vajra ring, and used the innate essence of her Shudan to refine the brilliance of this spiritual treasure, wanting to trap Wang Yue's siblings. Wang Yuanyu would not sit still and wait for death. The siblings teamed up to summon the Yin and Yang treasure chest. The Yin and Yang qi lingered around the chest. As soon as the lid was opened, a terrifying disaster that would make countless people's complexion change would surge out from the chest. Seeing that the battle was about to begin, Wang Lu helplessly shook his head, took 2 steps forward, unleashed his non-phase sword light and stood between the 2 sides. Under the sword of Mount Kuan, his sword defense soared to more than 10 feet. In the narrow stone room, it completely separated Zhou Mumu and Wang Yue's siblings. The 2 sides stared at each other, but found that no matter how they secretly urged their magical power, under the block of Wang Lu's non-phase sword defense, their magical power could not move forward at all. Both sides were inwardly aghast. In recent years, this Wang Lu was indeed famous for his invincible defense in the same stage, but who among the people present was not a top expert in the same stage? How could the elites of the 5 uniques be ordinary? It was a common thing for them to challenge others in a higher realm. For example, almost everyone had the capital to be invincible in the same realm. Therefore, although they did not look down on Wang Lu, they did not think that his defense could really be invincible in the same realm. Moreover, everyone's realm was not the same. Wang Lu was a low-level Shudan, while the Wangyue siblings and Zhou Mumu were high-level Shudan. However, these three high-level Shudan still seemed a bit weak in front of the non-Fei sword defense. Once the two sides felt weak, the hostile atmosphere suddenly weakened a bit. After Wang Lu established his might with his sword, he took advantage of the situation and scolded, "Fight! Fight! Fight! You only know how to fight. You guys are out of your minds, how dare you fight at this time?" With that, Wang Lu stretched out his hand and pointed at the stone wall. "I have translated the words above for you, who still doesn't recognize it. What is the fifth paragraph of the second article written? Behavior that violates the rules of the trial is regarded as a violation of the rules and will be disqualified. Do you think that fighting here is in line with the rules of the trial? Did the sword tomb open these 8 trials just to let you guys roll around like monkeys?" As soon as this remark came out, the two sides who were still angry were suddenly shocked. The chill in their hearts immediately dispersed and they calmed down. Zhou Mumu put away her diamond ring, and the Wangyue siblings also put away their treasure chests. Wang Lu sneered and said, "If you want to fight, then you two should quickly fight. Fight until your brains are all over the ground, and then you will all be kicked out of the filial piety gate by the sword tomb. My junior sister and I just happened to pick up a bargain. She will help me pass the trial easy and stress-free." Having said that, naturally no one had the heart to fight again. The two sides turned around with an indignant expression. However, when they turned around, the Wangyue siblings revealed a trace of anxiety. The development of things was different from what they expected. This Wang Lu really knew how to make trouble. From the beginning, the Wangyue siblings didn't intend to fight with Zhou Mumu and the others. They were not really stupid who would be willing to fight to the death here. Even if the comprehensive strength of Xingjing's sect was a notch above the opponent, they would have to pay a great price to win. Xingjing's sect just needed to show their attitude. In order to compete for the qualification to pass the filial piety gate, they did not hesitate to fight. Using power to oppress people was more in line with the interests of Xingjing's sect than using power to oppress people. The Wangyue siblings thought that with their strength combined with their treasure chests, it was enough to suppress any side present and thus gain the upper hand. However, unexpectedly, the yin and yang qi of the spiritual treasure was firmly suppressed by the non-phase sword light. In the end, it was neither Xingjing's sect nor Kunlun sect that overwhelmed everyone, but rather Lingjian's school. Wang Lu's defensive sword was sharper than any rumor. Such an opponent was not necessarily terrible but the most hateful. They may not be good at other things but they were absolutely superb at stirring shit. However, this was just the beginning, let's just wait and see. After the fight was interrupted by Wang Lu's sword, the contradiction returned to the negotiation table. How should the 7 spots be distributed among the 14 people? The 4 sects began to negotiate around this topic. Wangyue Wanyu, on behalf of Xingjing's sect, snatched the chair of the meeting and said, "Next, let's ask the representatives of the 4 sects to put forward their own plan, and then we will negotiate to solve it." Wang Lu, looking at your confident look, "Why don't you go first?" Wang Lu didn't refuse. "It's very simple, out of the 7 spots, our spirit sword sect wants 2, and the remaining 5 can be freely distributed among you." Wangyue Wanyu angrily said, "Nonsense." Wang Lu said, "No matter how nonsense it is, it's still in line with the procedure, in line with the standard of democracy and freedom. You're so flustered and exasperated, could it be that you're a supporter of autocratic dictatorship?" Wangyue Wanyu said, "Since Lingjian school doesn't have the sincerity to negotiate, then there's no need for you to continue to speak. Let's listen to the opinions of the other 2 sections." With that, she wanted to exclude Wang Lu from the negotiation table. However, Wang Lu didn't care at all. This kind of nonsense negotiation was time-consuming and laborious, and it wouldn't have a good result. He simply didn't want to participate in it. Therefore, as soon as he came up, he made a big move to clear the screen, leaving the other 3 sects to continue to waste time on the negotiation table. And the next development was as expected. Each of the 3 sects' proposals would always be vetoed by the others. Even Kunlun Immortal Sect and 10,000 Arts Sect didn't have a very good tacit understanding, and they often undermined each other. During this period, Hai Yunfan repeatedly looked at Wang Lu, hoping to get a helping hand. However, he saw that the latter had no interest in participating at all. Of course not. Even if they could unite the power of Spirit Sword Sect and 10,000 Arts Sect, they couldn't be compared to Xingjing's sect. In fact, as long as Xingjing's sect vetoed their proposal, any proposal would not pass. Of course, Xingjing's sect would always be vetoed by the other 2 sects, and they were also unable to pass. This absurd negotiation lasted for a long time, and the 3 sects were somewhat exhausted. At this time they looked at the free and unfettered Wang Lu and gnashed their teeth in hatred. However, this matter couldn't be dragged on indefinitely, there must be a solution. Wang Lu saw that someone on the negotiation table had even taken out the proposal of drawing lots, and inwardly said that it was almost time to make a move. They didn't want to fight, so they talked. If they couldn't negotiate, then they still had to fight. Moreover, with the anger of the negotiation, it would often be a real fight, a beating until their heads were bleeding, which was completely different from the deterrent behavior of the two sects at the beginning. This was also good. After breaking up several sects, he could take the opportunity to reap the benefits. In any case, it was the other three sects who drew the hatred on the negotiation table, which had little to do with him. Even if they wanted to fight, it wouldn't be his turn to take the lead. However, just when the scene had gradually fallen into a deadlock and was ready to jump at each other's throats, he suddenly heard Lu Li suddenly jump up and let out a pleasantly surprised cry. Great! For a time, the three parties on the negotiation table forgot their hatred and looked at her. Wang Lu was also curious. What's great? Lu Li's face was full of joy as she bounced and giggled in front of Wang Lu. Hee, before I entered the room, didn't you give me a question to think about? I've been thinking about it. Wang Lu simply prostrated himself in admiration. What the f*ck have you been thinking about that question just now? Yes, in order to prove that I'm not a fool. I figured it out. Wang Lu was stunned, and then his eyes almost popped out in surprise. You figured it out? An even number greater than 2 can be expressed as the sum of 2 prime numbers? Lu Li stuck out her plump chest and confidently said, That's right. Wang Lu felt that the world before him was spinning as if the whole world was not real. At this time, when he looked at that charming and lovely girl with a proud face, he felt that she was not the cute pet of the Spirit Sword Mountain, but a grandmaster of a generation. Perhaps after hundreds of thousands of years, the so-called Fengyin Taoist master and the 12 peaks of Spirit Sword Mountain would have disappeared in the long river of history, but Lu Li would certainly be remembered forever because of her earth-shattering mathematical talent. When the future generations mentioned this story, they would say, Once upon a time there was a Spirit Sword Mountain, and on that mountain there was a Lu Li. What the hell, this story is not right. Wang Lu resisted the urge to blow his head off. He inwardly said, I must have actual proof. Thus, he tremblingly asked, What about the proof process? Lu Li proudly said, I just tried from 2 to 1 billion, and each number can be decomposed into 2 prime numbers. What the hell, you used the exhaustive method to prove it? Moreover, in less than half an hour, you've already exhausted 1 billion? I'm awesome, right? You're indeed awesome, although it's awesome in another sense. But this can't be considered as proof. Upon hearing this, Lu Li gawked and then hurriedly asked, Why not? I've tried to reach 1 billion. Above 1 billion there are still 10 billion, 100 billion and even infinite billions. A mere 1 billion is really not enough, Lu Li pitifully argued, but I've tried very hard to calculate it. With that, she became a bit annoyed and her small face puffed up. Senior brother, since you think my calculation is wrong, then why don't you give me a counterexample? You're much smarter than me, so 10 billion, 100 billion are certainly calculated in the blink of an eye, right? Then tell me which number is wrong. What the hell, you're counterattacking me? Wang Lu had to sigh with emotion that mathematics really made people smart. This Lu Li actually learned the method of counterproof after calculating for a while. However, this was, after all, not a proper mathematical proof method. Wang Lu stretched out his hand wanting to touch Lu Li's head. However, the girl flung her head away and angrily said, Senior brother, you're the most annoying. Wang Lu retracted his hand, gawked for a moment, and then laughed in spite of himself. At this time, arguing with a girl about scientific spirit and mathematical theorem must be out of his mind. The correct response should be, Haha, I'm sorry I'm wrong. Lu Li, you've proved it very well. Come, this is your reward. From his mustard seed bag, Wang Lu took out a sparkling and translucent candy with rich spiritual energy. Lu Li's tears immediately turned into laughter and she happily enjoyed the candy. Wang Lu comforted his junior sister, but his heart was actually moved. Method of counterproof? This was actually a good way to solve the current impasse. I say, since you guys can't get a result, why don't you change to a simple method? Choose 7 pairs of parents and children, a total of 14 cards. Xingjing sect or our 3 sects will shuffle the cards. The other side will choose 7 of the cards, and the remaining 7 cards will be left to the person who shuffles the cards. What do you think? Chapter 239. Shortly after Wang Lu's proposal was put forward, it was supported by the other three sections. It was not that Wang Lu's proposal was novel. Many of the people present had heard the fable of the fox dividing the cake, and in reality similar games were not uncommon. The reason why no one proposed it before, on one hand, was that the atmosphere at the negotiation table was too strong, and no one was willing to take even half a step back. On the other hand, the premise of this method was that the two sides who divided the cake must be highly equal. However, the weight of Kunlun Immortal Sect and 10,000 Art Sect was not enough to contend against Xingjing Sect. Only with the addition of Lingjian School could they barely contend. However, since Wang Lu didn't express his position, Hai Yunfan and Zhou Mumu couldn't speak on his behalf. Xingjing Sect was even more eager to monopolize all the benefits, so that the other three sects would not be able to achieve anything in their internal strife. Thus, they didn't want to draw an equal pattern with the other three sections. Now that Wang Lu had expressed his position and proposed a feasible plan, the other three sects no longer insisted. Wang Yu said, "Since it's your proposal, then we'll decide who will shuffle the cards and who will pick the cards. No problem, right?" Wang Lu said, "Please?" Wang Yu smiled. "So straightforward? Then we'll be a bit more generous and let you choose." Wang Lu was surprised. "So generous? Very well, then we won't be polite. When the result is finalized, we'll inform you." Regarding the unusual generosity of Xingjing Sect, Wang Lu's response was to unceremoniously accept it. If there was any problem, then they could talk about it later. Since the situation had been decided, the three sects immediately began to discuss the countermeasures. "Brother Wang, it's best to let us shuffle the cards and let them pick." Hai Yunfan said through primordial spirit, "Shuffling the cards is a test of illusion technique, while choosing the sect is a test of illusion breaking. Unfortunately, senior brother Zai, who is the best at breaking illusion using thunder method, is not here. However, senior sister Feifei and I have studied illusion technique, so if the two of us join hands, we can cast 100 illusion level spell, reversing the two cards." Before he could continue, Zhou Mumu interrupted him, "If it's just the level of 100 illusions, then don't show it off. Even if Xingjing Sect is not as good as your 10,000 Arts Sect, it's impossible for their elite to not see through the 100 illusions." Despite being slapped in the face, Hai Yunfan was not angry at all. Instead, he asked in reply, "Then what is the opinion of Kunlun Sect?" Zhou Mumu said, "Let them shuffle the cards, we pick the cards. Although I'm not good at illusion and breaking the illusion, my junior brother happens to have the Subduing the Devil True Eyes, which can break the 1,000 illusion level spell. Unless Xingjing Sect really has so many talented people that they can casually pick out a team of people who is an illusion master, otherwise, it would be useless for Xingjing Sect people to play any tricks during the shuffle." Hai Yunfan looked at the silent middle-aged cultivator beside Zhou Mumu in surprise. "He actually has the Exorcism True Eyes. You really can't judge a book by its cover." The Exorcism True Eyes belong to a cultivator's innate magical ability, one of the 13 Earth-level magical abilities, which was exceptionally rare. Coupled with the correct acquired cultivation, it had a strong effect in suppressing the evil and breaking the illusion. Even if the cultivator was only in Shudan stage, they could still break the 1,000 illusion level spell. Generally speaking, among the Taoist masters of King Pill, very few people could master the 1,000 illusion level spell. It was indeed the most suitable magical ability to be used in this situation. Since Kunlun Sect has the Exorcism True Eyes, then it's best for us to pick the cards. But comparatively speaking, shuffling is more like defense, while picking the cards is more like offense. With Xingjing Sect style, they should be better at offense. Wang Lu said, "It doesn't matter. Since they have generously asked us to pick, they're not afraid of us playing tricks." "Hey, your position seems to be reversed. The nature is the same. In any case, whether it's illusion or breaking the illusion, it has nothing to do with me. I've tried my best to help you fight for it. Now, let me see the fierceness of Kunlun Sect and 10,000 Arts Sect." The final plan was for Xingjing Sect to shuffle the cards and the three sects to choose the cards. Xingjing Sect had no objection. The person responsible for shuffling the cards was a tall, thin and fair-faced young cultivator. According to Wang Yu's introduction, his surname was Teng and first name was Fei. Along the way, he was silent and didn't leave any deep impression on people. At this time, he was pushed by Wang Yu's siblings to shuffle the cards, which attracted everyone's attention. He only has middle-level Shudan stage cultivation base, moreover he doesn't have natural spirit root, and there are obvious traces of external stimulation. He's not completely self-cultivated. How could such a person be accepted by Xingjing Sect? Zhou Mumu somewhat found it hard to believe. She shook her head and said, Even if artificial spirit root is the invention of Xingjing sect, as far as I know, their inner court disciple recruitment is very strict. They almost never accept non-organic cultivators, so what's going on here? Wang Lu sneered. It's obvious this person is either a backdoor entrant or a special talent student. And since he was pushed by Wang Yue's siblings to shuffle the cards, it's obvious that the latter is more likely. There's probably going to be a good show later. Senior Sister Zhou, does your family's brother Zhang Li have the confidence? Without waiting for Zhou Mumu to answer, the middle-aged cultivator named Zhang Li coldly humphed. You don't have to worry about it. While speaking, he has already launched his subduing the devil true eyes. His two deep eyes suddenly changed and the dark pupils rapidly spread to the whole eyeball, which turned out to be pitch black. And in the infinite deep darkness, all evil spirits had nowhere to hide. The nearby Hai Yun fans secretly nodded. This is the dark subduing the devil true eyes. This is the first time I've seen a living example. Wang Lu laughed. Then after this trip to the sword tomb is over, how about I help you make a specimen of him? Zhang Li turned around and stared at him. His dark pupils seemed to hide a monstrous wave. Wang Lu's heart shivered. He felt as if he was trapped in the endless darkness, and a remote dark god was looking at him under the cover of the darkness. So that's how it is. This was the dark subduing the devil magical ability. Using a greater darkness to suppress the darkness was not a bad idea. Moreover, it also had an offensive nature. Sure enough, it was a rare innate magical ability. However, although this subduing the devil magical ability was rare, it was still too immature to deal with Wang Lu. Wang Lu gently rotated his non-phase immortal heart to expel the strange feeling. And that cultivator also withdrew his subduing the devil magical ability, no longer entangled with him. After all, at this time, Kunlun Immortal Sect and Spirit Sword Sect were in a tacit alliance. Then, under the gaze of the subduing the devil true eyes, the Xingjing sect cultivator calmly picked out 14 cards from the 2 piles of cards on the stone table. During this period, he used his magical power to bind the air, forming a barrier between his palm and the metal round card to avoid direct contact. Then he showed the 14 cards one by one in front of everyone. Zhang Li nodded his head. Correct, please shuffle the cards. With that, the darkness in his eyes became even deeper. His subduing the devil true eyes was pushed to the extreme by him, in order to see through every movement of the opposite party, not leaving him the slightest chance. Under the subduing the devil magical ability, any method under the table was just a joke. In this regard, Teng Fei faintly smiled, divided the 14 cards into 2 piles, and then shuffled them crisscrossed. During this period, although his fingers were flexible and free, there was no fancy skill. Or rather, the process of Teng Fei shuffling the cards was unbelievably simple. Zhang Li deeply frowned. He also couldn't believe that the other party would be so sincere. However, his subduing the devil true eyes didn't see the slightest abnormality. The stone room was silent, only the crisp sound of the metal round cards colliding with each other could be heard. Each sound made many people more nervous. A moment later, after the shuffling was finished, Teng Fei gathered the 2 piles of cards together, stacked them into a stack and held them in his hand. Then Teng Fei began to deal the cards on the stone table. The cards with words were facing down while the back was facing up. From the back, these round cards were exactly the same without any difference. However, who in the crowd could only judge a round card by its appearance? Zhang Li used his primordial spirit to transmit his voice. Strange, just now during the shuffling process, I could clearly see each card in this stack. What the hell is he doing? Zhou Mumu, Hai Yun Fan, and Yi Feifei also didn't find anything strange. Only Lu Li let out a soft cry of surprise, and after attracting everyone's attention she said, "These round cards look like the sesame seed cake that Master brought back last time." If not for the sake of Wang Lu's face, several people would have cursed out loud, "Sesame seed your sister." At this time, Teng Fei had already dealt the 13th card out of the 14 cards. Without any suspense, Zhang Li and the others could clearly see each of the cards. In a moment, when they chose the cards, they could easily pick out the 7 children cards and obtain the qualification to pass the test. Next is the last card. At this time, Teng Fei paused for a moment, looked up at the 3 sex cultivators, slightly smiled, and then put the 14th card on the table. Seeing this card fall to the ground, Zhang Li couldn't help but sigh in relief. However, the next moment he caught a glimpse of something from the corner of his eyes, which made him feel as if he had fallen into an abyss. His whole body turned cold. The reaction of the several other cultivators was not inferior. Soon they also saw that creepy thing. All 14 cards have been put on the table, but in Ting Fei's hand, unexpectedly, there were still round cards. Moreover, the number was neither more nor less, still 14. In the midst of everyone's horror, Ting Fei, with a smile on his face, put the 15th card, the 16th card, one by one on the stone table. Finally, there were more than 100 round cards piled up on the table. Unfortunately there's no more space. Ting Fei faintly opened his mouth and then loosened his hand. The metal round cards sprinkled down like rain, piling up on the ground. The number was in the thousands. Now, let's invite the 3 sects' fellow Taoists to pick the cards. According to the agreement, you can pick 7 cards first and the rest are ours. Inside the stone room there was a shocked silence. Ting Fei's method didn't seem to be fancy, it was just an endless number of cards. Let alone cultivators, even the mortal world had such a trick. The problem was, under the watchful eyes of the subduing the devil true eye, unknowingly turning the 14 cards into thousands upon thousands. Is this a spell beyond the 1,000 illusion level? Zhang Li inconceivably raised his head and looked at the seemingly ordinary Shengjing sect cultivator. Unexpectedly, a Shudan stage cultivator was able to cast a spell beyond the 1,000 illusion level. Was this a genuine master of illusion? Moreover, listening to the meaning of the Wangyue siblings, it seemed like this guy was just an abandoned chess piece in Shengjing sect. Because previously, when they mentioned that the quota for the pass was not enough, Wangyue Wanyun said that junior brother Ting Fei should be sacrificed. Wangyue Wanyu sneered. Shengjing sect is full of talented people. If anyone thinks that they have the qualification to show off in front of Shengjing sect people with just 2 or 3 insignificant skills, then that's really a frog in a well, a laughing stock. These words were impolite, but the other party also had the capital to be impolite. Zhang Li felt that his face was burning hot. The confidence and conceit that he had when he cast the subduing the devil true eye completely turned into a deep sense of loss. In front of him there were thousands of cards, but no matter how he looked at them, he couldn't see which one was real and which one was faked. During the silence, Hai Yunfan asked, "Senior Sister Zhou, do you have any other way?" Zhou Mumu struggled to shake her head. Hai Yunfan then turned to look at Wang Lu. Wang Lu spread out his hands. "I've already said that illusion and illusion breaking are not my expertise, so I really can't see it." Hai Yunfan felt even more at a loss. Even Wang Lu said that he was powerless, then did he really have to? However, at this time Wang Lu said, "Speaking of which, just now, little Luli mentioned that the sesame seed cake brought back by fourth uncle is indeed impressive." Hai Yunfan didn't know whether to laugh or cry, thinking, "What time is this, yet you're still talking about sesame seed cake?" However, he immediately thought, how could Wang Lu be someone like Lu Li who can't distinguish the priority? There must be a reason for him to say this. At that time, fourth uncle had just returned from the western continent and brought back a barley cake, saying that it was a sacred object made by the western continent sage. In those days the sage fed more than 5,000 people with 5 cakes and 2 fish. That cake has no other magical ability, except for one thing. No matter how it is divided, it can't be finished. Wang Lu said and then sighed. That cake seems to have been eaten by Lu Li in the end? Lu Li protested, "No. It's just that master said that it can't be divided for a while." Chapter 240. After listening to the dialogue between Wang Lu and Lu Li, everyone, as if by prior agreement, looked at Lu Li regardless of how much of a foodie this charming and lovely girl was. However, just now, she actually saw that the round cards in Ting Fei's hand were as inexhaustible as the western continent's holy bread. Could it be that she had a magical ability that was even better than the subduing the devil true eye? No, this question was simply stupid. Brilliant Sword Heart was an absolute magical ability that almost no one in the 9 regions could surpass. It was just that, no one thought that this Brilliant Sword Heart would also have such a strong effect in breaking the illusion. Zhang Li asked with a complex feeling, "Excuse me, can you see which of these cards are real and which are fake?" Lu Li turned her head and glanced at the pile of cards, and then said with a smile, "They're all real." Are they all real?" Wang Lu promptly explained, "It's normal. The western continent's holy bread, even if it's divided into thousands and thousands of pieces, it's still real. I've never heard of anyone starving to death after eating the illusion bread. The illusion has surpassed the 1,000 illusion level, so it's difficult to distinguish the real from the fake. This is a very normal thing." Zhang Lilian secretly scolded herself for being muddle-headed. She couldn't even understand such a simple truth. Just now, her mind was too shocked that it was difficult for her to think normally. Brother Wang, if you have a way, just use it. Don't keep people in suspense. Hai Yunfan urged. Wang Lu said, Lu Li, it's your turn. Lu Li nodded and didn't ask much. Instead, she focused her attention on the many round cards on the ground and then casually picked out the children card from them. Teng Fei incredulously looked at Lu Li. The card in her hand was one of the original cards that he used to cast the infinite division method, which was the real round card. She was able to break the infinite division illusion with just a wave of her hand? However, the next moment an even more shocking scene appeared. As the round card fell into Lu Li's hand, the pile of round cards on the ground suddenly clattered, and about 1/10 of the round cards disappeared into thin air. The pile of cards obviously dropped a level. This time Teng Fei sucked in a mouthful of cold air. Inwardly he was aghast. This is not breaking but breaking. It could be said to be the highest realm of Powang. Moreover, looking at Lu Li's appearance, it was obvious that she relied on her innate magical ability, not acquired calculation. Yes, just now when he said that she could eat the barley cake of the Western Continent sage, it was obviously not because her appetite was more than 5,000 strong men, but rather because she subconsciously launched her ability to break the illusion, making the cake lose its magical ability. There was always someone better in this world. As a disciple of the 5 uniques, his aptitude in immortal cultivation was not good. He completely relied on illusion to win the position of inner court disciple in Shengjing sect. However, it was also because of this that his attainment in illusion was high. The illusion technique that he was so proud of was actually so easily broken by someone. The shock he felt was no less than when Zhang Li's subduing devil true eye was suppressed. While he was in a daze, Lu Li, one after another, picked out all 7 round cards. Unexpectedly, only 5 of them were children cards, while 2 of them were parents' cards. Regarding this, even Lu Li herself was surprised. Hey, it's obviously not like that just now. Zhang Li was silent for a moment and then explained, the effect of that illusion technique is not only to create a lot of camouflage, but also to constantly shift the position of the parent card among the tens of thousands of cards. It needs to be very accurate to grasp the timing to grab the correct parent card. Fellow Taoist Lu Li, with her innate magical ability and intuition, was able to select the 7 parent cards, among which 5 are children cards, which is already very rare. Now that the 6 of us have 5 children cards, I voluntarily give up 1. Wang Lu said, good awareness. However, voluntarily giving up 1 card, I'm afraid it's not enough. Not enough. Just as he said that, he saw a trace of successful smile appear on the face of Teng Fei from the Shengjing sect side. You guys are really amazing. Even the illusion that I regard as my trump card was easily broken. However, in the end it's still 1 level less. While speaking, he suddenly flipped his palm, and then he heard Lu Li exclaim, hey, it changed again? The 7 round cards in her hand, 5 were children and 2 were parents. At this time they were completely reversed, becoming 5 were parents and 2 were children. And in the hand of Shengjing sect, there were 5 were children and 2 were parents. Although the trump card has been broken, fortunately the trump card is still there. This last layer of illusion technique is not only an immortal method, but also combined with some small tricks from the mortal world. It seems like fellow Taoist Lu Li has the magical ability to see through the illusion of a mortal method, but still lacks the eyes to see through the sinister world. With that, Teng Fei shook his head, retracted the illusion, and then pinched the 7 round cards in his hand. I thought I could achieve a complete victory, but unexpectedly, 2 of them were taken away by you guys. You guys are really amazing. Then he handed all the round cards to Wang Yuelwanyu. I'm sorry, senior sister, I couldn't achieve the expected goal. It's okay, you've done very well. Wang Yuelwanyu put away the round cards and then turned to Wang Lu. Do you guys have anything to say about this result? While speaking, her eyes were awe-inspiring as she examined the posture of the 3 sects, waiting for their response. Because although the result was that Shengjing sect had the upper hand if they wanted to pass the test, they needed the cooperation of the other 3 sections. In fact, the bet between the 2 sides was not on the round cards themselves, but on the distribution of the round cards. Otherwise, even if they got the children card without the cooperation of the parents card, it would be useless. Moreover, there were 8 people in Shengjing sect, so it was impossible for them to accept the pattern of each side occupying 7 cards. Therefore, before the bet, some rules needed to be established. That is, after getting the children card, in addition to the distribution of the holder, they also have the right to designate another person as the father, and the other party must unconditionally cooperate. Otherwise, this bet could not be established at all. Zhou Mumu, Hai Yunfan, and the others were naturally unwilling, but Xingjing sect's victory could be considered fair and square. The infinite division-level illusion technique, as well as the ingenious combination of tricks, could be said to be flawless. The three sects were unable to identify the real children card, which was an indisputable fact. As for Wang Lu, after a moment of silence, he calmly said with a smile, "Since I'm willing to bet, I'm willing to lose. Xingjing sect, please freely distribute the 7 round cards, we will fully cooperate with you." Although it could be seen that this posture was somewhat reluctant, it still made Wang Yuelwanyu feel powerless, as if she had punched a cotton. What she wanted to see was not Wang Lu, whose victory and defeat was a common thing. The woman was silent for a moment and then said, "Since I'm willing to bet, I'm willing to lose? Humph, after all, you have 2 spots in your hand, so naturally, you dare to say such cynical words. I just don't know if the fellow Taoists of Kunlun sect and 10,000 Arts sect can also be so generous." These words were somewhat meant to sow discord, but Kunlun sect and 10,000 Arts sect couldn't help but worry about it. With Wang Lu's temper, it was hard to imagine that he would generously give up the only 2 spots. However, the 3 sects had formed an alliance, so there was no reason for Spirit Sword sect to monopolize all the spots. In this regard, Wang Lu was still indifferent. "We don't need you to worry about how to distribute it, you guys from Xingjing sect should handle your own business." Wang Yuelwanyu said with a smile, "Very well, then I'll have to trouble you." At this time, looking at Wang Lu's indifferent face, Wang Yuelwanyu finally saw a bit of unsuppressible palpitation. Under his calm appearance, there should be a lot of unwillingness hidden, right? She heard that since he started his immortal cultivation, he had almost never suffered a setback, and all the way he advanced triumphantly. Now he finally tasted some bitterness. And this kind of person who was used to having the wind at his back couldn't stand setbacks, and it was very easy for his state of mind to be shaken. Unfortunately, her senior brother Jianglu was not here. Otherwise, with his temper and ability, he would certainly make Wang Lu suffer a bigger loss. What a pity, it's rare for me to win half a move against him in this most complacent battlefield. The process was really not easy. Were it not for her younger brother Luanyun's sudden inspiration to add another card in his hand when Ting Fei went on stage, the 3 sects would have really gained the upper hand. However, in the end they won. With a trace of relief and a bit of regret, Wang Yuelwanyu decided to end this quickly, so as to avoid any more trouble. 8 people and 7 cards were not enough. However, they only needed to determine the ownership of the 5 children card, and among them, they didn't need too much cooperation from the other 3 sections. 5 children card, me and Wanyun each hold 1. Ting Fei, your performance is good so you can have 1. Then Xiaofan and Zhao Jian each hold 1. We have 2 parents card, you and I are a pair, and Zhang Yan, you and Wanyun are a pair. As for the remaining 3 places, we need to ask the other 3 sects to help us. Wang Lu said, "It seems like Xingjing sect wants to produce and sell their own products? Very well, this parent card is yours, you can distribute it as you wish." With that, he threw the extra parent card on his side. "As for the remaining 2 places, I'll have to trouble senior sister Fei Fei and brother Zhang Li. Kunlun sect and 10,000 Arts sect will each send 1 person. There's no objection, right?" Of course there were objections. For example, Zhou Mumu really wanted to ask, "Does your Lingjian school really want to monopolize the 2 places?" Hai Yunfan also wanted to say that if they must send someone, he would rather replace Yi Feifei. However, Wang Lu's tone was completely unquestionable. His imposing manner was so overbearing that the other people actually had no time to interrupt. Wang Yuelwanyu inwardly chuckled. Already flustered and exasperated? Sure enough, young people can't stand setbacks. However, the most urgent task was not to make fun of Wang Lu, but to complete the filial piety procedure as soon as possible, so as to avoid any more trouble. Fortunately, there were several key places that they had to cooperate with their family, so there was basically no trouble. As for the 2 places that they had to ask for help from the 3 sects, it could only be regarded as the price that they had to pay. However, Xingjing sect had a lot of treasures, so when they went back they could just find their sect to reimburse them. And in the silent complacency of Xingjing sect people, the parenting and filial piety procedures were completed one by one in an orderly manner. During this period, the only accident was that when they performed the filial piety for Yi Feifei and Zhang Li, the price they had to pay was slightly beyond their expectation. Zhang Li actually took out a middle-rank spiritual treasure-level pill furnace, which made Xingjing sect people flustered for a while. Finally, they managed to scrape together all the treasures needed for the filial piety. However, no matter how many changes happened in the middle, in the end they still won. When the last Xingjing sect cultivator also completed the filial piety procedure, a cold voice sounded in the stone chamber. Do you want to confirm the completion of the procedure? Wang Yuelwanyu subconsciously nodded. At this point there was really no possibility of a reversal. As the second in command of Xingjing sect team, she led the team to defeat the coalition of the other three sects, especially the victory over Wang Lu. The process was really not easy. At this time when she thought about it, she was filled with physical and mental exhaustion. However, before she could enjoy the taste of victory from the corner of her eyes, she saw that Wang Lu in the loser group suddenly revealed a crafty smile. Wang Yu's heart immediately sank, as if she had fallen into an ice cave. That was the last scene she wanted to see. She knew that she must have done something wrong, but in a hurry, no matter how she thought about it, she still couldn't find the flaw. A moment later, the cold voice in the stone chamber once again sounded. With an unquestionable ruthless tone, it said a conclusion that made Xingjing sect people dumbfounded and tongue-tied. Confirming the participants, Wang Yuelwanyu, Teng Fei, Wu Xiaofan and Meng Zhaojian are disqualified. Why? Wang Yuelwanyu angrily questioned, but there was no response from the stone chamber, as if it had completely abandoned these several useless chess pieces. And the one who answered her question was Wang Lu. Why? Because the second paragraph of the rules states that the violation of the principle of the trial is regarded as a violation of the rules, and the disqualification. The principle of the filial piety gate trial is filial piety, and there are 3 ways to be unfilial, and having no descendants is the worst. There are 3 ways to be unfilial, and having no descendants is the worst? Not only Wang Yuelwanyu and the other Xingjing sect cultivators, everyone present was shocked speechless by this sentence. There are 3 ways to be unfilial, and having no descendants is the worst. Where did this saying come from? How could it be used in this trial? Wang Lu said, looking back at the rules again, it's not difficult to find that there are hidden hints everywhere, warning you that the way to play this game is not as stupid as eliminating half of the people. The principle of the filial piety gate is filial piety, but the simple dichotomy is simply deceptive, completely not in line with the principle of filial piety, so how could it be the right way to pass the trial? Look clearly, the most important 2 rules are, parents and children correspond to each other, not one against many or many against one. One person can only have one identity card. Wang Yuelwanyu looked back at the stone wall and felt that there was indeed something strange hidden inside. However, for a moment she was in a trance and could not concentrate on thinking. However, after Hai Yunfan pondered for a moment, he suddenly realized. The first few rules of this rule all use the words parent card holder. But when it comes to the second rule, it suddenly simplifies to parents and children correspond to each other, completely abandoning the concept of the card holder. In fact, it implies that the identity of the card holder and the card holder are not strictly consistent. The problem with the latter rule is even more obvious. A person can only hold one identity card but not one kind of identity card. Looking at these 2 rules together, there is no doubt that a person's identity is not unique. Wang Lu said, yes, as for the other rules, more or less they all have the intention to mislead. If you don't know the result in advance, it's really difficult to infer. But was there really a need to spend so much effort to deduce this? The common sense of life is right here. Which parent doesn't grow up from their children? Which child doesn't eventually become a parent? Parents and children are 2 sides of the same coin, just like this metal round card also has 2 sides. With that, he picked up a parent card and wore it on his chest. The next moment he turned the round card over. On the back, the word children was already printed. Look, I've got feedback from the real world. Next, as long as I respect my parents and love my children, I can become a link in the family chain and pass the game perfectly. And in theory, with 14 people, I only need to sacrifice 2 people at most. Wang Lu smiled. Look, in fact, this level doesn't even need the quality of a professional adventurer. As long as you have basic common sense, you can play well. But you guys think you're smart and play like this. It's really sad. Wang Yuelwanyu almost vomited blood when she heard this. Yes, now your analysis is reasonable, as if everything is natural, but when everyone first entered the stone room, who was the one who said that they would cut off half of the people? Who took pains to encourage teammates to fight for the children card, and led everyone's thoughts to the fight for the children card, but ignored the real key? Who was the one who had amazing acting skills like a movie king, who was calm with palpitations, and who had a hidden unwillingness in his eyes? Wang Lu smiled and said, yes, I did it, but isn't this natural? Everyone is playing a battle game, not a single-player game. Cheating each other is the norm. And knowing that we are in opposing positions, but still believing in my nonsense and performance instead of blaming me, it's better to blame your own intelligence. Sister Wang Yue, do your family know that you are so naive? I'm afraid you've never been in love before. After a pause, Wang Lu said, in short, although I'm sorry, I have to say that I won. Chapter 241. If the rules of this filial piety trial were reviewed from the beginning, it was not difficult to find out that the way to pass this trial was actually very simple. The key to pass the trial was extracted: filial piety. If one only considered the conditions and rules of filial piety, that is, the children should give back twice the amount to their parents for their upbringing. Thus, many people's first reaction would be to string the relationship of the participants together, parents corresponding to their children, children corresponding to their children's children, and so on. In fact, this was also the correct way to solve this trial. At most, only the leader of the team could not be filial. Considering the potential rule of being unfilial, at most, the people at the end of the team would be excluded, sacrificing 2 people, and the remaining 12 people would all pass the trial. How could they sacrifice half of the people in the beginning? Moreover, filial piety turned into deceiving one's father. What exactly was this filial piety trial testing? However, one could not blame the Xingjing sect people for not being able to make sense of the situation, because the designer of this room undoubtedly harbored a lot of malice. Outside of the core rules, there were a lot of misleading items. For example, the identity card setting was completely misleading. On the stone table, the parents' card and the children card were piled up, which made people subconsciously separate the two, never thinking that it was one and the same. In fact, if not for the existence of the identity card and only considered the concept of parents and children, anyone would think that the parents must be other people's children, and most of the children would also be other people's parents. In addition, parents and children had to correspond with each other, and each person could only hold one card. These were all rules that hinted to the trial takers, whether intentionally or unintentionally, that they had to step over half of the people's corpses to pass this stage. Coupled with Wang Lu's professional adventurer quality from the very beginning, he gained the upper hand by making a show of strength, using various means to deceive and mislead. It was no wonder that the Xingjing sect cultivators couldn't think of the truth of this trial. However, one could not blindly blame Wang Lu for being cunning and insidious because basically, everyone entered the stone room at the same time and read the rules, so how could Wang Lu, from the very beginning, identify the correct solution and not be disturbed by the misleading items? Instead, he added fuel to the fire, trapping Xingjing sect? This was the difference in the way they thought. When Wang Lu extracted the core of this trial and discovered that the most suitable way to complete this trial was to string everyone together, what he needed to do next was to find a way to convince himself that all the other obstacles could be eliminated in a suitable way. For example, there was a subtle difference between one identity card and another identity card. For example, the correspondence between parents and children did not mean that the parents' identity cards and the children's identity cards corresponded to each other. Explanations like these could achieve the initial predetermined goal without violating the rules: to string them together. Therefore, since it made sense, it was naturally best to explain the problem in a way that made sense. Furthermore, from an academic point of view, the fewer the assumptions, the more reliable the theory was. Thus, the concatenation method only needed to assume that there were 2 sides to the metal plate, but the concatenation method needed to assume that the filial piety test was a trap. Comparing the two, naturally, the concatenation method was more credible. From the perspective of thinking, it was actually not that bizarre. If there was no interference from Wang Lu, allowing everyone to think independently, at least more than half of the people in Xingjing sect could quickly come up with the correct answer. Unfortunately, as Wang Lu said, this was a game of confrontation. From the beginning to the end, they didn't have the space to think smoothly. Then the next step is to complete the parenting and filial piety in this order. Wang Lu said, and then made his own arrangement, which was simply listed as Zhou Mumu parents, Lu Li children, Wang Lu parents, Hai Yun Fan children, Yi Feifei parents, Xingjing sect person A children. In this way, only Kunlun sects Zhou Mumu and Zhang Li were eliminated. However, Kunlun people were actually quite straightforward. It doesn't matter, elimination is elimination. Being able to drag 8 Xingjing sect people down with me, my heart is happy. In this regard, Wang Lu also returned the favor by instructing Lu Li to give Zhou Mumu a big gift in the way of filial piety: 13 mysterious sky crystals. As the lead disciple of one of the 5 uniques of the Wanxian League, Zhou Mumu, of course, was not short of money. However, 13 mysterious sky crystals was still a number that could not be underestimated, thus, Zhou Mumu gladly accepted it. Although compared to the mysterious sky crystals, she wanted Wang Lu's help in the next few tests. In fact, this time 10,000 Arts sect had completely taken advantage of Wang Lu. If not for Wang Lu's trick to completely wipe out Xinjing sect people, under the pressure of Xinjing sect people, it would be very difficult for these two people of 10,000 Arts sect to smoothly pass. When the filial piety procedure was completed, the cold voice sounded again. This time it was not the ruthless elimination, but rather, congratulations to Lu Li and Wang Lu, for passing this test. Under the jealous and hateful eyes of Xinjing sect people, the metal plates on their chests turned into balls of light and integrated into Wang Lu and the other two people's bodies. Wang Lu felt a warm force flowing through his whole body. His primordial spirit involuntarily shook, and each shock wave set off a wave of excitement and joy. It was like taking a very high-purity hallucinogenic elixir. However, a moment later Wang Lu felt that in this boundless pleasure, there was also a trace of pure inexplicable energy, which was far purer than the ordinary surrounding spiritual energy. Although the amount was not large, after it poured into his body, it aroused a wonderful reaction. Wang Lu felt that all the buildings and plants in his jade mansion, under the urging of this aura, grew taller and moved toward a higher level. The void core in the middle of his jade mansion also absorbed the energy and gradually condensed out more entities. After an unknown period of time, the tide-like pleasure gradually disappeared, and the turbulence in his jade mansion also stabilized. Then Wang Lu's cultivation base rose by half a level. It didn't seem much, but when converted, it was equivalent to more than a year of Wang Lu's hard work. And if he had all 8 virtues, wouldn't he be able to immediately raise his cultivation base by 4 levels? Was this the benefit of virtue? Letting good deeds be rewarded with good deeds was indeed a good way for people to pursue virtue. At least it seemed so. Thinking more deeply, Wang Lu couldn't help but smile. He turned around and saw that the other people who passed the test also had a blush on their faces. Obviously they had experienced the taste and benefits of virtue. After that, Wang Lu was ready to leave with Lu Li. However, just as he turned around he heard Wang Yu's gnashing teeth voice. "Wang Lu, this time you win, but senior brother Jianglu will not let you go. Let Jianglu say this to me. You don't have the qualification to provoke me." Actually, from the beginning Wang Lu didn't really put Wang Yue's siblings in the same position as him. He was the lead disciple of Lingjian school, so as one of the 5 uniques, only the lead disciple of Xinjing sect, or someone with a similar position as the lead disciple, had the qualification to have a face-to-face dialogue with him. Even Jianglu, who led the team this time, actually lacked the weight, let alone Wang Yue's siblings. As for offending Xinjing sect? So what if they offended them? Before this test, perhaps there were still some scruples, but after this test, the cohesion of the 3 sects had been greatly strengthened. Lingjian school had obtained the leading position, and their team strength could completely compete with Xinjing sect. The next game would only be more interesting. After walking out of the filial piety gate, the cultivators from the 4 sects came forward to inquire about their well-being, and then impatiently asked about what happened inside the gate. After the filial piety gate, everyone felt that the bizarre trial rules were inconceivable, and they also had a new speculation about the 8 virtues trial. However, in any case, having reached this step, even if it was a mountain of swords or a sea of fire, they could only tread through it. In other words, no matter how absurd the rules were, at least they had to pass the test first. Then, when they learned that Wang Lu almost single-handedly led this trial and successfully wiped out the 8-people team of Xinjing sect, the reactions of the several sects were different. Bai Shixian just lightly congratulated him, seemingly indifferent to the filial piety gate trial. Zhan Zai wholeheartedly cupped his hands across his chest. This was a rare show of respect from the always arrogant representative of 10,000 Arts sect. The cultivators of Kunlun sect had a slightly complex feeling. After all, both Zhou Mumu and Zhang Li failed to pass the test. However, considering that Wang Lu defeated the Xinjing sect, he could still be regarded as a respectable teammate. However, in the eyes of Xinjing sect, they couldn't wait to pull out their tendons and tear their bones into 8 pieces. Over the years, when had Xinjing sect ever suffered such setbacks and insults? Even though Xuanxian sect had a big business, it was inevitable that they would encounter bumps and bumps all over the 9 regions. Xinjing sect was relatively magnanimous about this. Unless it was a key issue, otherwise, it didn't matter if they were taken advantage of by others. However, right now these 25 people represented the elite disciples of Xinjing sect, yet they were actually played in the palm of someone's hand and even maliciously deceived. How could they tolerate this? Senior brother, we are incompetent, we are willing to be punished according to the sect rules. Regarding the Wang Yue siblings' panic, Jianglu just coldly humphed. After we return to the central region, go and receive your punishment. Now, I want you to honestly deal with the matter in front of you. Yes? Jianglu didn't blame the Wangyue siblings too much for their failure. In the final analysis, letting his two deputies face the famous Wang Lu was indeed his own mistake. At that time he should have personally come forward. However, who could have thought that the trial after the filial piety gate would be like that? According to Jiang Lu's speculation, if it was a competition of spells and fighting ability, the Wangyue siblings would not lose to Wang Lu. However, who would have thought that it would be a pure scheming game? At that time, Xingjing sect just made a relatively standard choice. In the handbook that Xingjing sect summarized and distributed to the disciples, it was indeed written that when the road was unclear, it was best to avoid personally leading the team to explore the road. However, such a thing would only happen once. From the second trial onwards, Jianglu would personally come forward to challenge the next 7 trials, not leaving any chance for Wang Lu. Of course, in terms of scheming, he knew that he was not Wang Lu's opponent. However, after many years of cultivation, he also had a wealth of experience in dealing with opponents who were exceptionally scheming. Otherwise, he wouldn't be the team leader. Let's wait and see from the second trial. Jiang Lu's eyes were firmly locked on the not far away Wang Lu. "Tsk, it feels like I'm being stared at by a perverted idiot." Wang Lu suddenly frowned, sighed, and then looked up at the sky. The clear sky between the mountains had gradually been shrouded in a layer of haze. "Brother Wang's talent is outstanding, so it's inevitable that you'll become the target of public criticism." Hai Yunfan smiled, but then he immediately restrained himself and said with a sinking voice, "Brother Wang, I always feel that this 8 virtues test is a bit strange. Although the filial piety gate does have the concept of filial piety, but..." Wang Lu waved his hand. "Don't think about it. Even if it's just a gimmick, the test is, after all, an insurmountable barrier. It's nothing more than a reminder that what you need to pass the test is not necessarily virtue." Then Wang Lu talked to himself in his primordial spirit. "Moreover, I always feel that the victory of the filial piety gate is not because I can see more than others, but because Xingjing sect has more people than us." Chapter 242. After the gate of filial piety was the gate of fraternal duty. Fraternal duty meant fraternal love and mutual help. If extended broadly, it could also be extended to friends helping each other. With the experience of the gate of filial piety, everyone had considerable vigilance toward the gate of fraternal duty. Although it was called fraternal love, it basically had nothing to do with true fraternal love. Just like the test of the gate of filial piety, although it implicitly stipulated that the principle of filial piety must not be violated, the people who passed it actually didn't show the true filial piety. Giving a treasure to a cultivator who was not related to them was considered filial piety? How could there be such a ridiculous thing? The test of the 8 virtues was just a cleverly designed checkpoint, which tested the wisdom and adaptability of the participants, not simply the 8 virtues. However, this was also in line with people's understanding that the 8 virtues of the sage were the mortal world's virtues, not the virtues of a cultivator. For example, filial piety. When a cultivator embarked on the immortal path, they had to cut off the mortal world's karma, and filial piety was almost impossible to talk about. After all, compared to the long life of a cultivator, the dozens of years of parents were really insignificant. Moreover, on the path of immortal cultivation, it was impossible to always be with their parents. According to the rule of 3 unfilial to have no descendants, there were almost no filial children in the immortal cultivation world. If it must be said, it was nothing more than filial piety to the master, but that was far from the concept of parents and children. Thus, the remaining several virtues had different meanings for cultivators. However, at this time, it was useless to think too much about it. If they didn't enter the gate, they wouldn't understand the design of the master of the sword tomb. After the first trial of the gate of filial piety, people found that the gate could indeed only be opened once. Although 2/3 of the people hadn't participated in the test, the gate of filial piety would still not be opened again. Therefore, the second entrance test was to dispatch the whole army. Fortunately, these 8 gates could only be opened one by one. Before the end of the second trial, the third gate would not be opened. Otherwise, the complexity of this game would increase again. Because, according to Wang Lu's habit, it was very likely that after gaining a temporary advantage, he would immediately let Bai Shixian and Lu Li open the back door, and then quickly give up the test and destroy that door. In the end, Wang Lu would defeat the other 0 virtue opponents with 1 to 2 virtues. Don't worry, the ancient sword tomb will not allow that kind of situation to happen. It needs to observe the fights and competition between cultivators, and not simply select cultivators who have passed the 8 trials. After all, no matter how extraordinary the rules are, they are still dead, only the fights between people are alive. Wang Lu's words made many people's hearts sink. The next 7 stages would only get more and more difficult. In fact, everyone's guess was right. After entering the Fraternal Duty Gate, many people did not expect what happened. In the beginning, the scene of the Fraternal Duty Gate and the Filial Piety Gate was similar. It was also a long and narrow dark passage with dozens of people walking in it. However, this time, it was the Xinjing sect team that acted as the vanguard. Less like the Filial Piety Gate, Wang Lu took the lead and dominated the whole game in one fell swoop. However, the Fraternal Duty Gate and the Filial Piety Gate were different. At the end of the passage was no longer a narrow stone chamber. After walking for about the time to drink a cup of tea, a bright and spacious square appeared in front of the crowd. On the square, a stone tablet was hung upside down. The stone tablet was still engraved with strange ancient handwriting, which was translated as follows: Rules 1. Brothers on the wall, resist the insult from outside. 1. 2 people in a group become brothers, sisters. 2. Each person holds 100 chips, which are used to resist the insult from outside and inside the wall, and the proportion is freely distributed. 3. If the total amount of chips used by the 2 people in each group to resist the insult from outside exceeds, including 100, they can successfully resist the insult from outside and get double the amount of chips as a reward. If the total amount is less than 100, it will be regarded as a failure in resisting the insult from outside and lose the qualification to pass. 4. After the 2 people in each group successfully resist the insult from outside, the winner and loser will be determined according to the number of chips inside the wall. The one with more chips wins and gets all the reward chips for resisting the insult from outside. If it's a tie, the reward will be divided equally. 5. Those with 200 or more chips pass. 2. Relevant requirements. 1. Virtual chips cannot be copied, destroyed, or issued in any form in violation of the rules. 2. Participants will distribute the chips according to their free will, and cannot make decisions on behalf of others in any way. 3. Those who have more than 200 chips can get the reward from the exchange list after passing the test. 4. After grouping, there is a time limit to make a decision. If no decision is made within the time limit, it will be regarded as a forfeit. After reading this row of rules, everyone kept silent. The rules were not difficult to understand, and they didn't seem to have too many twists and turns. Compared to the rules of the Filial Piety Gate, it was much simpler. However, after experiencing the big reversal of Wang Lu in the first round, no one dared to look down on these few lines of words. Who knew if there was a hidden killing intent in these seemingly ordinary statements? After all, in the Filial Piety Gate, there were 3 ways to be unfilial, and having no descendants was the worst, which really left a deep impression on people. Needless to say, Xinjing sect, Kunlun Immortal sect, and 10,000 Arts sect began to seriously study the rules of the Filial Piety Gate. In these few lines of words, countless hidden meanings were chewed out. Before long, everyone's eyes lit up. Obviously, each of them had their own ideas. Wang Lu also seriously read the rules twice. After thinking about it in his heart, he couldn't help but shake his head. What does this have to do with brotherly love? This is clearly a prisoner's dilemma. Moreover, it's a prisoner's dilemma full of malice. According to the rules, it was easy to draw such an inference. There were only 2 possibilities to successfully pass the test. The first was that the 2 brothers used all 100 chips at the same time to resist the enemy's humiliation, and when the final settlement came, each of them would get 200 chips to pass the test. The second was to use part of the chips to resist the enemy's humiliation, and the other part would be inside the wall. As long as the chips used for the internal fight were more than the opponent, they could defeat the opponent and monopolize all the reward money. Although they haven't seen the exchange list yet, it was likely that there would be an amazing treasure. Of course, it didn't matter whether it was a treasure or not. The important thing was that under such rules, any rational person, unless they had a high degree of trust in the other party to the point of ignoring reason, must win the game of inside the wall by stepping on the opponent's corpse to pass the test. However, the more interesting part of this game was right here. If one wanted to win the test of inside the wall, how should the chips be distributed? First of all, they must at least ensure that the defense against the enemy's humiliation would not fail. Thus, the required 100 chips must be divided equally among everyone. Because no one was stupid, once the chips used to resist the enemy's humiliation were used, the chips inside the wall would be less than the opponent's. If it was divided equally, it would be 50 chips per person. However, the result was that neither of them won. In the end, they could only get 100 chips each and both of them were eliminated. Therefore, it seemed that the inside-the-wall method was unsustainable. If they wanted to win the game using the inside-the-wall method, wouldn't it be a dead end? Thus, they could only return to the first method, which was to simultaneously come up with 100 chips to resist the enemy's humiliation. In this way, both of them would pass the test and everyone would be happy. However, what if the other party also thought so? If the other party also thought that they could only pass the test by coming up with 100 chips to resist the enemy's humiliation, then as long as they put out a chip to resist the enemy's humiliation, they could win 100 plus 99. Asterisk 2 is equal to 398 chips. Thus, the problem was further complicated, which made it difficult to solve in a rational way. In the end, even though they knew that their choice was to perish together, they still couldn't help but choose it. Moreover, there were still several key questions that couldn't be read by just reading the rules. For example, the most important one: how were the brothers divided into groups? Voluntary union, or was it chosen by the sword tomb? Unsurprisingly, it should be the latter. Voluntary union? That would be too easy for everyone. However, if they were randomly divided into groups, the advantage of Xingjing sect was overwhelmingly strong. They had too many people. According to the rules of this test, the number of people was more important than anything else. Even if Wang Lu went against the heaven's will, at most he could guarantee that he alone could pass the test, but he absolutely could not block the action of Xingjing sect people. Moreover, according to his speculation, it was likely that he himself would not be able to pass this test. Thinking to this, Wang Lu's heart was moved. He quietly pulled Lu Li and Bai Shixian over and explained the key to them. A moment later, in the filial piety stone chamber, that cold voice rang out. The test begins. The next moment, a purple light shone under everyone's feet, and then they were transported by the irresistible transmission spell of the sword tomb to a narrow grid that was independent of each other. In the grid there were 2 stone tables. On each table there were 2 pieces of paper and a pen. The pen and paper were not ordinary objects, but at this time, they were only used to record the participants' chip allocation plan. One piece of paper was written with outside, and the other one was written with inside. As long as the pen wrote the number on the paper, the chip allocation would be completed. However, the important thing at this time was not the allocation plan but, "Wang Lu, I trust you've been well since we last met." Along with the familiar voice that rang in his ears, Wang Lu inwardly sighed with emotion. Sure enough, he turned his head and saw little sister Wangyuel Wanyu behind him. The woman's face was calm, her delicate hand holding the brush, and the ink gently fell on the paper. "Yo, your action is quite agile." Wangyuel Wanyu softly said, "Wang Lu, do you want to pass the test? As long as you promise me one thing, I will immediately write 100 on the outside, helping you to easily win. As long as you promise me one thing." Wang Lu laughed. "Little sister Wangyue, can I ask you a question?" Regarding Wang Lu's rhetorical question, Wangyuel Wanyu somewhat didn't expect it. "What do you want to ask?" "I want to ask, you've obviously suffered a big loss, so why can't you correctly understand your own IQ? You. As the deputy of Xingjing sect team, your responsibility is to implement the will of team leader Jianglu, not to act arbitrarily and think yourself clever. Do you want to make a deal with me to help me win? We've just formed a feud of killing our father, and now you want to repay me with your body. Do you think I'll be fooled?" Wangyuel Wanyu was silent for a moment. "I do want to make a deal with you. Unfortunately, I already have someone I like, so I'm not interested in your deal." With that, Wang Lu turned around and, under Wangyuel Wanyu's incredulous gaze, wrote down his own allocation plan. Without any concealment, in front of Wangyuel Wanyu's face, he calmly wrote on the paper that symbolized inside. 100. "Okay, I'm done, it's your turn." Wang Lu put down the brush and indifferently looked at Wangyuel Wanyu. Chapter 243. Wang Lu inside the wall, 100 chips. When this result appeared, Wangyuel Wanyu could no longer maintain her calm and was dumbfounded. What are you doing? Don't you want to win?" Wang Lu said with a sinking voice, "I have no attachment to a game that I can't win, so don't waste your time." "No attachment to a game that you can't win? What kind of reason is that?" Wangyuel Wanyu felt that her mind was in a mess. What Wang Lu said was not quite the same as everyone's analysis. Everyone thought that Wang Lu's temper should be the most competitive, and in fact his attitude was indeed a mess. Obviously, their sect was the weakest among the 4 sects, yet he dared to lead the other 2 sects to confront Xingjing's sect head-on. How could such a person easily give up? It was precisely because of this reason that when she found out that the opponent of the group was Wang Lu, Wang Yuelwanyu threw her senior brother's advice to the back of her head and tried to make a deal with Wang Lu. However, unexpectedly, the deal was ended before it even started. Oh, you don't understand? Actually, the reason is very simple. If I can win the game, I will fight for it. If I don't have much chance of winning, I will not waste my effort. After a pause, when Wang Yuelwanyu's mind was still in a mess, Wang Lu confidently said, "Simply put, I am the legendary instant retreat dog." Instant retreat dog? The rules of this round are overwhelmingly advantageous to you. As long as you small fries rush up and write 100 inside the wall, no one will be able to turn the tide. Therefore, in the face of you, this round, I decisively retreat. You can go and enjoy yourself. With that, Wang Lu waved his hand toward Wang Yuelwanyu. The next moment, a light flashed under his feet, and he was teleported out of the grid, leaving behind Wang Yuelwanyu, who still couldn't believe what she just heard. Outside the grid, most of the people haven't finished the game yet. Only a few people from Xingjing's sect appeared in the square with a complacent face, discussing the situation just now. Those who passed were naturally assigned to their own team when they were divided into groups. Then they discussed different ways to pass the stage. Some chose the same 100 chips as the other team, which was a win-win situation. Some sacrificed one person so that the other team could obtain 398 chips to exchange for treasures. Xingjing's sect had the most people, so this round was simply tailor-made for them. After a while, several cultivators from 10,000 Arts sect and Kunlun sect were sent out with different complexions. It seemed that although they won, the situation was not as smooth as Xingjing's sect. Although Spirit Sword sect, 10,000 Arts sect and Kunlun sect, the 3 sects have formed an alliance, their relationship, after all, couldn't be as tacit as Xingjing's sect. Encountering their own sect was still fine, but encountering other sects, their fragile alliance relationship was unreliable. Although these people won, the price they paid was not small. After a while, Kunlun sect's Zhou Mumu, with a face full of anger, was sent out. Along with her, there was also a Xingjing sect cultivator who was still in a state of shock. Zhou Mumu roared, "Despicable and shameless." Then she threw out her diamond ring and was about to smash it. Xingjing sect naturally refused to be outdone. Although in a one-on-one fight, none of them was Zhou Mumu's opponent, the biggest advantage of Xingjing sect was the number of people. 4 or 5 people simultaneously made their move, and all kinds of spiritual treasures scattered in all directions, unexpectedly forcing the diamond ring to be unable to advance even an inch. "What are you fighting for?" Wang Lu scolded, took 2 steps forward, and used his non-phase sword to block the 2 magical treasures from both sides. The complexion of Xingjing sect cultivators changed. Feeling the bouncing force from the magical treasures, they finally personally experienced what Wang Yue's siblings said, the taste of an indestructible defense. Zhou Mumu also felt her breathing stagnated. Her anger was blocked by the non-phase sword light, which blocked her chest and made her want to vomit. Although she knew that this block from Wang Lu was more or less helping her. After all, in a real fight, it would be very difficult for her, a cultivator who didn't specialize in fighting, to gain an advantage. However, her mood was gloomy, which was difficult to relieve. She angrily said, "You, the winner, really know how to make sarcastic remarks." After experiencing the test of filial piety, Zhou Mumu had almost no doubt that Wang Lu would pass. In her opinion, there was probably no difficulty that could baffle him. Of course, after a bit of calmness, Zhou Mumu was also very curious. If it was Wang Lu who was faced with Xingjing sect people's shameless face-to-face tactic, how would he break it? Seeing how relaxed he was it because he wasn't assigned to Xingjing sect people as his opponent, or did he have an unexpected move? However, the next moment Wang Lu shrugged. "Senior Sister Zhou, you overestimate me. I'm just a dog that can retreat in seconds, not a winner." Zhou Mumu gawked for a moment, and then realized what Wang Lu was talking about. You also lost?" Just then there was a flash of light on the square, and Wang Yuelwanyu with a complex look appeared on the square. Wang Lu casually pointed at her. "I met her." Zhou Mumu cast a disdainful glance at him. "Wang Yuelwanyu? A woman who thinks she's smart, she probably pretended to want to make a deal with you, but you decisively saw through it and rejected her, right?" Wang Lu inwardly sighed with emotion. Although Senior Sister Zhou has a straightforward temperament, in the end she is still a woman, and when looking at other women she is often unexpectedly sensitive. Then he said, "Fortunately, I actually think that if I really meet her needs, she can cooperate with me to pass the test." Zhou Mumu curiously asked, "Then why did you give up?" Wang Lu said, "Because compared to paying a great price to pass the test, I prefer to see her dissatisfied expression." Zhou Mumu tried to pretend to be dismissive of this dirty joke, but in the end she still couldn't help but laugh out loud. On the other side, upon hearing this, Wang Yuelwanyu's complexion turned exceptionally ugly. Moreover, it seemed like there was indeed a bit of dissatisfaction in her expression. "But after all, you lost once, don't you have any thoughts?" Zhou Mumu curiously said, "For example, I am indignant about the despicable shamelessness of Shengjing sect people. No matter what, we are still allied forces, yet they are actually unscrupulous in cheating their own people. I say, are you really calm or are you just trying to maintain your image?" Wang Lu laughed. "Speaking of despicable shamelessness, I'm not much better than them." Thinking of Wang Lu's glorious record, Zhou Mumu was speechless. It was just that, after a while, she felt indignant. But this time Shengjing sect people's method is too cheap. They directly rushed up and bet 100 coins on the wall of brothers, which is basically mutual destruction. The rules unexpectedly didn't stop them, it's completely unsolvable. Wang Lu said, "The rules are not like the last time," which clearly stated that it must conform to the rules of the trial. As for unsolvable? Not to mention there is a way to crack it. Just as he said that, 2 rays of light flashed on the square. Lu Li with a smiling face appeared in front of everyone. A moment later, Bai Shixian also smiled and appeared in the light. Without waiting for Wang Lu and Zhou Mumu to greet each other, Lu Li happily ran over. "Senior brother, your guess is really accurate." "One? Zhou Mumu was startled and hastily asked, "Did you also meet Shengjing sect people?" Lu Li nodded. "Yes, just as senior brother expected. Just as I entered, I saw a fellow Taoist from Shengjing sect." Without demur, he immediately picked up the brush and wrote on the paper. Listening to Lu Li's description, Zhou Mumu vaguely understood Wang Lu's method to crack it. And just at this time, a ray of light flashed from Shengjing sect's side, and 2 unconscious disciples were sent out. Lu Li said, "Then I took out my sword and knocked him out. When the time limit was up, he would be considered as abstaining. And according to senior brother's instruction, I wrote 100 on the paper, which was considered as passing the test." Zhou Mumu nodded. According to the rules, if there was no interference from another person, even if there was only one person, they could still pass the test. Obviously, Lu Li and Bai Shixian took this path. To put it bluntly, there was nothing complicated about it. However, before the test began, they had already made up their mind to make the first move, which was even more ferocious than Shengjing sect people's frontal attack tactic. Should she say that Wang Lu was indeed worthy? However, since he already had a way, why didn't he do it himself? "Because I can't do it. My attack power is so bad, and the one I encountered is Wang Yuelwanyu. In addition to instant retreat, there's no other way. In fact, among the 25 people of Shengjing sect, only by encountering Jianglu could I pass the test." Zhou Mumu curiously asked, "Jianglu? Isn't he the strongest?" Wang Lu said, "He's the only one who knows the fierceness of my non-phase sword art, yet he still dares to confront me head-on. If it's someone else, at most they would flirt with me verbally like little sister Wang Yue, but they would never dare to confront my non-phase sword defense. Therefore Jianglu can be the leader. Even if Wang Yuelwanyu has other strong points, she can only be the deputy together with her brother." "Well said." Wang Lu's voice has just fallen when they saw a burst of light on the square, from which came Jianglu's domineering voice. Along with Jianglu, there was also a disciple of 10,000 Arts sect, but he was already unconscious. Obviously, when Jianglu arranged the frontal attack tactic, he also thought of the countermeasure to this tactic. Although that disciple of 10,000 Arts sect was somewhat quick-witted, encountering the unreasonable Power King, he could only kneel down. Jianglu approached in big strides and then loudly said, "This time, not being in the same group as you is really my biggest regret. Non-phase sword is known as the world's #1 defense, I really want to see it." Wang Lu nodded. "Very well, I've long heard that senior brother Jianglu's Power King true body is an ancient inheritance. It's an immortal level method that has reached the 39th layer. Every time you lift your hand, you have the power to overturn rivers and seas. In recent years, you have become famous for breaking 10,000 methods with one strength. And with my non-phase sword, I have met countless strange methods from countless heroes in the world, but I've never been able to compete with Power King True Body, which is a method that pushes one to the extreme. It's really a pity." Upon hearing this, Jiang Lu's complexion slightly eased a bit. Because although what Wang Lu said was not flattery, it was the truth. Therefore Jiang Lu felt complacent. Wang Lu said, "Then why don't you and I have a fight?" Just as Jiang Lu was about to nod, he heard Wang Lu continue, "The loser will take his men and roll out of the ancient sword tomb, how about it?" Jiang Lu's countenance immediately changed. Whimsical. With that, he turned his head and no longer paid attention to them, even though his attitude changed so quickly that his junior brothers and sisters were also dumbfounded. Zhou Mumu spat out, "He seems forthright, but his face changes as fast as flipping a book. Just a moment ago he said he wanted to fight you, but in the blink of an eye he shrank back." Wang Lu lightly smiled. This is the difficulty of being a leader. Before he has the certainty of victory, he can't place too big a bet. Therefore he can't accept the challenge. Instead of being repeatedly provoked by me, he might as well make a decision. This guy is much more powerful than Wang Yue's siblings. Well, in any case, there's no more fun in this round, we can leave now. Although at this time the team in the square was obviously not complete, and 10,000 Art Sex Zhan Zai Yi Fei Fei, and the others have yet to appear, Wang Lu apparently lost interest in continuing to play. He turned around and walked toward the corridor. Beside him, Bai Shixian hesitated for a moment and then softly asked, "Senior brother, you seem somewhat happy?" Wang Lu replied, "Yes, because I finally found the right way to play this game." Chapter 244. When they left the fraternal duty gate, Wang Lu casually said that he had found the correct way to play this game. At that time there were many people who heard this sentence, such as Zhou Mumu and her several junior brothers from Kunlun Immortal Sect, Zhan Zai and Hai Yunfan from 10,000 Arts Sect, who had just walked out of the gate. By the way, all of them smoothly passed the test, although the price was not cheap. However, no one understood the meaning behind this sentence. Even Hai Yunfan felt that this sentence was more like Wang Lu's momentary teasing or stubbornness. No matter how cleverly he performed in front of Jiang Lu, after all, it couldn't change the fact that he failed to pass the fraternal duty gate. Although from the point of view of the 8 virtues test, the failure in the second test was nothing more than returning to the same starting point as Jiang Lu and the others. However, for a professional adventurer who pursued perfection, perhaps this was a very bad start? Therefore, although Wang Lu looked very relaxed, some people around him had already begun to whisper in their hearts. As for Lu Li, how could a naive girl care so much about it? Only Bai Shixian keenly captured this detail. After a moment of hesitation, she asked through primordial spirit, "Senior brother, you said you found the correct way to play this game. In other words, everyone's way of playing is not correct?" Wang Lu smiled. "What do you think?" Bai Shixian said, "I'm not as smart as you, senior brother. I just think that, although in the beginning it was said to test the 8 virtues of the cultivators, in fact that's not the case at all. Although I don't know much about the rules and management of the human world, but I think what everyone showed just now, in any case, has nothing to do with virtue, right?" Wang Lu said, "From the time I saw the rules of the filial piety gate test, I knew that these 8 virtues have nothing to do with virtue. However, the key problem is not here because no matter what it tests as the challenger, we only need to do it according to the rules. At least in the first test I basically had this idea. Based on the rules of the filial piety gate, I seriously considered the method to crack it, and at one point I achieved results. Those 8 people from Xingjing sect were miserably cheated by me. But when I got to the gate of fraternal duty, you saw the result. I was the one who was tricked." Bai Shixian sighed, "Our luck really isn't too good, the rules are too disadvantageous to us. If it weren't for senior brother's arrangement in advance, me and junior sister Lu Li wouldn't have been able to pass. It has nothing to do with luck. It's the wrong way we're playing, or rather, we've been going in the wrong direction from the very beginning. There are some problems that I haven't completely figured out, so it's not convenient for me to talk too much about it now. However, you can rest assured and watch my performance. Your senior brother Wang Lu will definitely not disappoint you." Once again hearing Wang Lu's confident reply, Bai Shixian softly smiled and said, "Yes." After the fraternal duty gate, the people of the 4 sects gathered again in front of the 8 gates. The morale of Xingjing sect was obviously exuberant. If in the first pass the filial piety gate was a complete victory for Lingjian school, then in the second pass the biggest winner was Xingjing sect. Although the performance of Lingjian school seemed to be good, in the eyes of other people, they had already been faintly suppressed by Xingjing sect. Because although Lu Li and Bai Shixian passed, the most important figure Wang Lu didn't pass. Moreover, for the other three sects cultivators, even if they passed, they just barely scraped the passing line. The situation of Kunlun Immortal World and 10,000 Arts sect was the same. However, because of the advantage in numbers, several people from Xingjing sect managed to get 398 chips in exchange for the first prize on the list. The ancient sword tomb was indeed worthy to be a true immortal level relic. The 8 gates test was just the middle of the long test, and the fraternal duty gate was just one of the 8 gates, yet it gave them a luxurious gift of middle-rank spiritual treasure and high-rank panacea, which made the several cultivators of Xingjing sect unable to contain their joy. At the same time, after successfully passing the test, the reward of advancing their magical power by half a level was also a pleasant surprise. More importantly, with the entrance of Power King Jianglu, Xingjing sect seemed to have once again become invincible. Whether it was in terms of wits or strength, Jianglu was more than enough to rival Wang Lu. In the fraternal duty gate test, Wang Lu was pulled down from his high horse by the frontal attack tactic. At the same time, behind Jianglu was a formidable team of cultivators, while behind Wang Lu was the seemingly united but actually divided 3-sect alliance. As long as they continued on, Xingjing sect would certainly obtain an absolute victory. In this regard, Wang Lu just sneered. The third gate was the loyalty gate. The situation inside the gate was not much different from the previous 2 gates. It was a long dark passage, and behind the passage was another world. Inside the loyalty gate was a relatively spacious stone room. In the middle of it stood a stone tablet, which was engraved with the rules of this test. With the experience from the previous 2 gates, they initially didn't expect that this test would have anything to do with the virtue of loyalty. However, after carefully reading it, unexpectedly, this was perhaps the first time to test a person's virtue. Rules 1. Loyalty is a kind of faith, a kind of wholehearted devotion, a kind of undying desire. Loyalty can withstand any test. 2. Questioning is a kind of attitude, a kind of comprehensive interrogation, a kind of meticulous investigation. Questioning can disintegrate hypocrisy and purify loyalty. 3. Relevant procedures. 1. Declare an object of loyalty. Each person's declaration is limited to 1 time, and the object cannot be changed. 2. Raise doubts about the loyalty of others. 3. The same object can only be questioned once. 3. Once the loyalty is successfully questioned, it will be proven false, and the person will lose the qualification to pass the test. 4. Maintain the loyalty and not be proven false. Successfully questioning the loyalty of 2 or more participants, meeting the 2 conditions will be regarded as passing the test. 5. Failure to make a declaration or the declaration is proven false, does not affect the questioning qualification. Seeing this rule, many people's hearts were moved. Was it finally time for the real virtue test? Compared to the filial piety gate and fraternal duty gate, the rules of the loyalty gate finally appeared somewhat normal. Especially the interpretation of loyalty at the beginning, which seemed to set a relatively orthodox tone for this test. However, if one looked down at the previous line, it suddenly appeared a bit strange. Questioning? Of course, true gold fears no fire. The best way to show loyalty was to stand firm in the face of doubt. However, with the experience of the first 2 levels, the rules of doubt seemed to be a little provocative. Mobilizing the masses to fight against the masses, the final result would often be the victory of ugliness over virtue. The first 2 levels were no different. Especially considering that there was a professional adventurer here, everyone's heart was even more vigilant. While they were thinking, the cold voice that appeared in the previous 2 tests once again sounded. It said in the ancient language, "Please declare your object of loyalty." In the silence, a Xingjing sect cultivator rushed to say, "I declare I am loyal to Xingjing sect." With that, a layer of faint golden light flashed on his body. Wang Lu and the others turned to look and saw a plain-looking cultivator. Previously, he didn't leave any impression on them, but this time he gained the upper hand by making a show of strength. No matter how they looked at it, he was a bit cannon fodder. Jianglu didn't make a sound, Wang Yue's siblings also didn't make a sound. An unknown little guy gained the upper hand by making a show of strength. Did Xingjing sect cultivators not understand the rules? It was obvious that they had agreed to use this little guy to test the specific rules of this round of the game. After he finished his declaration, Wang Lu also took a step forward and began his own questioning. As soon as he opened his mouth, the Xingjing sect cultivators felt their hearts tremble. He was indeed worthy to be a professional adventurer. He was steady, accurate, and ruthless. If there is a power struggle within the sect and internal division, which side will you be loyal to? That cultivator froze for a moment and then righteously said, "Shengjing sect will never have an internal division." Wang Lu smiled. Never? What about the 9 regions calendar year 1337 of the Sea of Blood on Mount Spirit? What about the fall of one mountain in 1365? Don't say that the blood demon ancestor and broken mountain Taoist were not from your Shengjing sect. Not to mention the power struggle every time the position of the sect leader was passed down. Although there was no blood in the light, there were waves in the dark. Was the sudden death of Supreme Shou Shan 730 years ago really caused by cultivation deviation? When Supreme He Tu succeeded the position, did Supreme Wan Ling, who voluntarily withdrew from the competition for the position of sect leader, really feel ashamed of his inferiority? Shengjing sect is a big sect with as many strong as clouds. Among them, there are countless talented and bold cultivators, so how could the inside be as gentle as water? You're an inner court disciple of Shengjing sect, how could you be less familiar with the inside of the sect than me? Since you're well aware of it, why do you have to say that there will never be an internal division? Your mouth may sound nice, but in your heart, you're just trying to act according to the situation, stand in the right position and seek personal benefit. Being questioned by Wang Lu, that cultivator was dumbfounded and sweated profusely. I'm not. Loyalty is a kind of wholehearted devotion. You can't even be honest with the real situation of Shengjing sect. How can you talk about loyalty to the sect? You better leave. Before his voice fell, a crisp sound was heard, and the golden light shield that shrouded his body suddenly shattered. Wang Lu waved his hand. Questioning successful. Next. Shengjing sect people were not surprised by this result. In fact, if Wang Lu didn't speak, they would be surprised. However, in any case, he was just cannon fodder, so they could have as many as they wanted. The second Shengjing sect cultivator came forward. I declare as a cultivator, I am loyal to the immortal cultivation path. Wang Lu immediately questioned, what if your immortal cultivation path has a conflict of interest with the Shengjing sect? That person was actually smart. Shengjing sect fully respects every disciple's pursuit of the immortal cultivation path. Wang Lu sneered. If they really respect it, how could they send you out as cannon fodder? That person retorted, some things always need people to do, and the sect will give me enough compensation. Wang Lu continued to sneer. Is the path that you cultivate the path of selling your body for compensation? Why don't you go and blackmail others? Why don't you go and sell your kidney? Why don't you go and ask to be a mistress? You even use the sect's compensation to show off. Are you cultivating the path of slavery? It's useless to talk too much. Next. Before long, 4 people from Shengjing sect were successfully questioned by Wang Lu, and the golden light shield was broken. For a time, the whole place was silent. It was not a shock. Whether it was Shengjing sect or the other sects, they were not surprised by the situation. In fact, the biggest role of these 4 cannon fodder was to dig out the profound meaning behind this test. The first 4 people made statements in various forms, but Wang Lu easily found the flaws in them. It was not that they deliberately threw in the towel, but for cultivators, loyalty was a very elusive concept. It was difficult to be loyal to the sect, but to be loyal to the immortal cultivation path, it was also closer to an ideal but difficult to turn into reality. On the contrary, questioning others was very easy. Before Wang Lu could even make his statement, he had already pushed back 4 people. Then the next question was, how do they pass this test? Chapter 245. Although it was expected that Wang Lu would kill 4 Shengjing sect disciples one after another, the rules of the test reflected in these 4 rounds were still inwardly alarming. Although the 4 Shengjing sect disciples were cannon fodder, none of them died for the sake of dying. When they made their declaration, they also interrogated their conscience and confirmed that their loyalty was not fake. However, Wang Lu didn't use any spell to confuse their hearts, nor did he use his powerful strength to coerce them, nor did he use benefits to tempt them. Merely by using his words, he disintegrated the loyalty of the 4 people. Was it because Wang Lu's eloquence was too good that it had broken through the sky? Obviously, this was not the case. The problem was not with Wang Lu. The same question also lingered in the hearts of the other sect's cultivators. Hai Yunfan frowned and whispered to Wang Lu, this loyalty test is very strict. It seems to require absolute loyalty. This theoretically possible? Loyalty, absolute loyalty, this was a completely different concept. Take the following short story as an example. A certain sect's cultivator, Chen Xiaoqiang, had reached an important time in his cultivation. When he was about to go into closed-door training, he was suddenly summoned by the sect, asking him to go thousands of miles away to perform a task. At this time, putting aside his personal interest and respecting the sect's interest, was that loyalty? Of course it was. If he wasn't loyal, he could just say that he was sick and so on. Then the story continued. That cultivator, Qin Xiaoqiang, went thousands of miles away, risking his life to perform a task for the sect. Unexpectedly, he was plotted against by his enemies, who captured his entire family. His beloved wife, his parents who were spending their later years in their hometown, and his newborn child, all of them were controlled by his enemies. The enemies wanted him to betray the sect's interest, otherwise, they would inflict all kinds of torture on his family. Qin Xiaoqiang clenched his teeth and watched helplessly as his child was hammered into meat paste and his parents were pushed into a frying pan. Although his heart felt like it was being cut by a knife, he never betrayed the sect. Well, the enemies were also surprised by Qin Xiaoqiang's willpower, so they used an even more despicable method. If he didn't comply, they would summon all kinds of demons to defile his wife. This loyal cultivator finally couldn't bear it any longer. He and his wife had gone through too many trials and tribulations in their union, and their feelings for each other were unwavering. He would rather suffer 10,000 times the torture than let his wife suffer even the slightest bit of harm. His heart was agitated and wavering. Time slipped away as he watched his wife fall into the crowd of demons. Her clothes were torn to shreds and her snow-white body was exposed. He clenched his teeth, wishing he could die immediately. It was better than witnessing that sentence with his own eyes. However, how could his enemies let him go so easily? Forcing him to watch all of this, Qin Xiaoqiang endured and endured with unimaginable willpower. Finally, after an unknown period of time, the beautiful woman who had accompanied him for many years disappeared. In front of him was a chunk of flesh that no longer resembled a human. But from the beginning to the end, he did not reveal a single secret of the sect. The next question was Qin Xiaoqiang considered loyal? Most people, when faced with such a question, would immediately retort, "This is King loyalty to the point of being twisted?" However, according to the standard of loyalty, unfortunately, Qin Xiaoqiang could not be considered loyal. Because, after witnessing the tragic death of his family and the humiliation of his wife, his heart was shaken. Although in the end he did not make a decision that was detrimental to the sect, he could not be shaken. Because, since he was shaken, it meant that the test he had suffered was not cruel enough. If the weight on the other side of the scale was increased, he would eventually betray the sect. This was absolute loyalty. Among the more than 40 people present, none of them were disloyal. To be able to be regarded as elites by the sect and be sent to the ancient sword tomb, there must be something trustworthy about them. However, compared to the requirement of absolute loyalty, they were obviously far from it. In fact, the question everyone was considering was absolute loyalty possible? Regarding this question, Wang Lu did not hesitate to give an answer. Of course it's possible. Dozens of pairs of ears stood up at the same time. Wang Lu said with a smile, "Isn't it enough to refine people into meat puppets? Creatures without brains are the most loyal. So far, aside from a few cases where the refining skill is not good enough, has there ever been a case where a meat puppet betrayed its master? No, right?" CK. Dozens of people simultaneously roared in their hearts, "Isn't this King nonsense?" Wang Lu's face turned serious. "Nonsense? That's right, refining people into meat puppets is pure nonsense, but what if I play it out again?" Hai Yunfan seemed to understand and nodded his head. "Play it out again?" Wang Lu said, "For example, refine a meat puppet, and then declare that you are loyal to him and will never disobey any of his requests." This. Hai Yunfan was stunned for a moment, and then immediately laughed. What a cunning method. Obviously, the meat puppet is loyal to you, but you want to do the opposite. However, there seems to be a similar record in the history books. Using the emperor to order the feudal vassals. It's just that this method seems to be loyal, but the person who used this method in the past was regarded as a traitor for all eternity. Wang Lu gave him a thumbs up. As expected of someone from an imperial family, you're very familiar with the relevant history. Hai Yunfan laughed. "You're making fun of me. Now that I've stepped onto the path of immortality, the riches and glory of the mortal world are no longer fated with me. Brother Wang, although this method of turning the guest into the host and using the emperor to order the feudal vassals is ingenious, it's still not the right path." Wang Lu said, "That's right, it's too ridiculous to declare loyalty after refining people into meat puppets. But what if I play it out again?" This time even Hai Yunfan couldn't guess. "Play it out again?" "That's right, It's impossible to declare loyalty after refining a meat puppet, because the refiner and the meat puppet have an inseparable karma. Then what if the karma is severed? For example, declaring loyalty to someone who's already dead. Hai Yunfan was surprised. Pledging loyalty to someone who's already dead? Yes, pledging loyalty to someone who won't ask anything of you. Does that mean you don't have to worry about disobeying the other party? That does make some sense, but it seems that there are still hidden dangers. Of course, as long as a person has lived in this world, there will always be traces left behind. As we often say, forever live in the heart. And behavior that goes against this virtual image can also be regarded as disloyalty. But what if we go one step further on this basis? Please speak frankly, Brother Wang, I really can't guess your idea. The rest of the cultivators from Xingjing sect and Kunlun Immortal sect also had the same expression. Whether it was pledging loyalty to a meat puppet or pledging loyalty to a dead person, both seemed to be quite practical. Unexpectedly, in Wang Lu's opinion, all of them were not enough, and he could even go one step further. It was really hard for them to keep up. Wang Lu said, "Then take me as an example. Now I declare." As soon as this statement came out, the whole room was shocked. Wang Lu actually personally came out? Could it be that he really has the confidence to win? What exactly did he mean by going one step further on the meat puppet tactic? Under the watchful eyes of the crowd, Wang Lu lightly smiled and said, "I declare my loyalty to XX." The next moment, golden light flashed, and the declaration had taken effect. XX. For a time, even the previously calm Jianglu was slightly startled. What was XX? The so-called XX is just a code. It's a mysterious existence. It can't be observed by anyone in any way, and its real name can't be spoken by anyone in any way. As for me, I declare my loyalty to it. With that, Wang Lu looked around provocatively. Now, I welcome everyone to question my loyalty. There was a long silence. It was not that they didn't want to open their mouth, but when they saw the golden light on Wang Lu, Xingjing sect people were like wolves and tigers. They couldn't wait to open their mouths in unison and beat Wang Lu's golden body into meat sauce. Because as long as they once again excluded Wang Lu from the quota in the loyalty gate, the advantage of Xingjing sect would be irresistible. However, how could they open their mouths? Wang Lu's declaration sounded unimaginable, but when they thought about it, it seemed impeccable. It couldn't be observed by anyone in any way. In other words, it wouldn't have any impact on reality. Otherwise, any effects that were created could be indirectly observed. Compared to the meat puppet and the deceased, this was indeed a step further. It wouldn't have any impact on reality, so naturally, it wouldn't be violated in the slightest. Pledging loyalty to it was simply an unbreakable golden body. After a long time, a Xingjing sect cultivator tried to open his mouth and ask, "What exactly is this XX that you said? How do you want to pledge loyalty to it?" Wang Lu decisively replied, "No comment. No comment. Does the rule say that after being questioned I have to answer? No. That being the case, of course I have no comment." How could this be? Everyone's eyes almost popped out of their sockets. This Wang Lu was indeed worthy to be known as the #1 in the world in terms of defense within the same stage. Not only his non-phase sword was powerful, his Bulsh *T was also incomparably slick, making people completely unable to make a move. For a time, even the Power King Jianglu couldn't think of how to crack Wang Lu's theory. He was confident in his own wisdom, but in front of Wang Lu, he had to admit that he paled in comparison. However, Wang Lu was too confident. Coming out so early was tantamount to giving other people an advantage out of thin air. What was an advantage out of thin air? Specifically, "Zhao Jian, you do it?" Jianglu turned his head and winked at a junior brother from his sect. That cultivator nodded and then loudly said, "I declare my loyalty to YY. The so-called YY is just a code name. It is essentially a mysterious existence. It cannot be observed by anyone in any way, and its true name cannot be spoken by anyone in any way. As for me, I declare my loyalty to it." His lines were exactly the same as Wang Lu's. Regarding this, Wang Lu couldn't help but laugh. Giving them a taste of their own medicine? Unexpectedly, the dignified Xingjing sect also has a counterfeit business. Jianglu faintly smiled. "Actually, I can guess that you have a way to crack your own theory. However, we can also use the same method on you. Now you're welcome to question it." Wang Lu was silent. After a long time he said, "You're indeed worthy to be one of the top 10 experts in Xingjing sect. You really have some skill." Jianglu turned his head. "Luan Yun, the two of you also declare your loyalty?" Then Xinjing sect people made their declarations one after another. Before long, the stone chamber was filled with golden light. However, not everyone made the same declaration as Wang Lu, because the condition to pass the test required 2 successful questioning. If everyone made this impeccable declaration, they would not be able to successfully question each other, which was tantamount to everyone failing to pass the test. The advantage of Xinjing sect people was once again revealed. Soon the internal allocation was made. Some people would be sacrificed as offerings, and the purpose was to be successfully questioned. Of course, this also needed to pay attention to some skills, because the same problem also existed for Kunlun Immortal Sect and 10,000 Arts Sect. In case Xinjing sect's offerings were successfully questioned by them, it would be difficult for Xinjing sect's own needs to be satisfied. Therefore, the declaration of offerings and being questioned were almost simultaneously completed, not giving other people the opportunity to take advantage of the opportunity. A moment later, the golden light in the stone chamber dimmed a lot. 2/3 of people's loyalty had been broken. Including Wang Yue siblings, a total of 6 Xinjing sect cultivators supported the golden light and completed the 2 questioning. If there was no accident, they would officially pass the test. Out of caution, Jianglu didn't rush to declare his loyalty, but he first completed the 2 questioning. However, soon after he saw Lu Li and Bai Shixian also made the same declaration. Jianglu frowned and then completed his declaration. After all this was done, most of the Xinjing sect cultivators felt that the general situation had been settled, so they breathed a sigh of relief. Compared to the previous 2, this test was much calmer. Although they didn't drag down Wang Lu as expected, at least they didn't pull away from him. However, the next moment they heard Wang Lu say, "It can't be observed in any way. Things that have no effect on reality are equal to non-existence. Declaring allegiance to such things is simply self-deception." With that, the golden light shield around his body shattered. "The rest of you are the same. Since you're copying me, don't waste time explaining, just break it all together." The crackling sound continued one after another, and in the blink of an eye, the golden light in the stone chamber shattered, turning the room dark. However, under people's extremely astonished eyes, Wang Lu finally smiled happily. The biggest feature of these 8 trials is that it's much easier to be defeated than to pass. Therefore, I decided to start from this test and put all my energy to defeat you. At present, in terms of virtue, junior sister Lu Li is still in the lead by 1 virtue. And according to the rule, the one with more is also the winner. Now I, as a professional adventurer, make a statement. From this test, there will be no one who can pass the next 5 tests. Including me. That you're tuning in to the Han Li's Wuxia Chronicles YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.